Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 3 is the roll call. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings.
Here.
Bajent. Bajent.
I think he dropped out.
It disappeared from me.
I'm here. I'm having a little difficulty, but I can still see you and I'll be back real soon.
Thank you. Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson. All present.
Thank you. Fourth item on the agenda is a request for approval of the City Council minutes of November 17th.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the City Council minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting from November 17th, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson. Councilmember Thompson.
I saw his mouth say yes.
We will take that as a yes, but I cannot hear Councilmember Thompson.
Okay.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are now to item 5, special business. First item on special business is findings and affirmation of PUD 19-11 and CFH 19-13. Celine is here to present.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, council members, Celine Accord with the current planning team. This really is just informational. In your packet tonight was just findings and affirmations of the court's decision to reaffirm the planning and zoning's approval and that their decision now stands.
Thank you, Celine. Are there any questions by council members? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to affirm.
Oh, I'm sorry. It said information only, so I didn't realize we needed an affirmation. Madam Mayor, I move that we affirm the findings for PUD 19-11 and CFH 19-13 as presented in our packet.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
There we go.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, thank you. Item 2 on special business is resolution, excuse me, 54920, ratifying Public Health Emergency Order 20-13, regulating businesses, individuals, face coverings, airport bars, bicycle bars, and public meetings, and to be enacted, if passed, enacted on November 19th, 2020, and providing an effective date and to be consented to tonight if City Council so chooses. I would like to, the mayor was unable to be with us tonight, and she asked me if I would cover the important parts of this particular order. This order was enacted to slow the spread of the COVID-19 virus. It was done in partnership with local businesses, and so far, both businesses and many of their patrons are reacting well. People are taking the virus more seriously. We do need to continue to do our part in the coming days and months, wear our masks, stay socially distanced, wash our hands. And in order to ensure that people were serious about this, the city issued Public Health Order 20-13. Also, Governor Little announced that Idaho is back at stage 2 of reopening, and that order says gatherings are limited to 10 people and under. The new city council, or the new city of Boise public health order, requires face coverings, limited occurrence of certain city of Boise boards and commission meetings. When the Boise City Council and other boards and commissions do meet, no more than 10 people can attend in person. The number limit of 10 includes members of staff, security, and the public. Restricted airport access and restricted access to other city facilities, and enforcement of order violations for individuals and businesses. That enforcement is something that was long asked for, and in working with businesses, the city came up with a plan to protect residents, ease the burden on our healthcare system, and ensure that businesses can continue to stay open safely. So beginning on November 23rd, businesses who have a patron who's not complying with the health order or have protocols in place that are not being complied with, a representative of the business can ask our city officials to help with the patron, ask them to comply. If the patron continues to refuse to comply, they can ask the patron to leave the business. If they do call the police, a police officer will be dispatched to speak with the individual. If they continue to refuse to comply or leave the premises, the officer may issue a trespassing citation and or arrest the individual. Businesses that are reported for not complying will be inspected by a Boise City code enforcement officer or an appropriate central district health inspector, as is called for in their particular license. If it is a Boise license and there's a violation found, the business license can be suspended. If a business has had their license suspended multiple times, that business may have their license revoked. So far, there have been no licenses suspended and certainly none revoked. Businesses have been complying for the most part, and we've had a few inspections, but found no violation that would warrant a suspension. So with that, the resolution is before the City Council.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion and then I have some comments to follow up. I move that we approve RES 549-20, a resolution ratifying Public Health Emergency Order 20-13.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
this is something that we have really been pushing for a long time, which is a call from our businesses to help them have some backup when they ask their patrons to wear a mask and comply with CDH's health orders. I think this is a really important step. And we've also received a lot of emails in the past couple of days from citizens of Boise who have, I think, really legitimate concerns about, having to be being required to wear a mask in public. And there are a lot of folks who, for reasons that many of us don't understand, cannot wear a mask in public. And we still have exceptions for folks who have medical reasons. And so I would say, if you are somebody who cannot wear a mask, so many of our businesses are offering alternate delivery options. You can call in orders and have them delivered to your vehicle or outside of the business. And so please take advantage. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. I don't think that we're in this forever anymore. So we just need to stay strong for these last few months and really make it through this. And if you are in public and you see somebody not wearing a mask, please don't give them grief. You just don't know what their experience might be and why they might not be wearing a mask. So I definitely support this public health order, and I hope that it serves the purpose of keeping our businesses open, keeping folks safer, and helping us get through this.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes, thank you. I agree with everything Council Pro Tem Woodings just stated. I am very supportive of the directive put forward by the mayor. You know, we're all in this together, and we're facing the highest rise in COVID across this country since it began, and we've all, you know, experienced similar experiences in our limited daily activities and how we've had to go about to protect our families and our friends and one another. I firmly believe that it's our patriotic duty to withhold the guidelines, stand by the guidelines, wear a mask, socially distance, and this practice of enforcing to some degree these measures is not uncommon. It's across the entire United States. It's in red states and blue states, in Texas and Oklahoma. It's in cities that you would maybe not expect it to be enforced. And we are certainly not doing anything that's uncommon. I think what we're doing is extremely the patriotic and the right thing to do to protect our citizens, our most vulnerable, and those that could be dramatically impacted and have been in many ways already through loss of life or loss of illness and loss of work time. So I firmly stand behind it, and I also want to note that I agree with another thing Councilmember Wooding said, and that's that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm no medical expert, but we certainly all are aware of the same information, and that's that several vaccines are on the horizon that look very positive. I'm also very positive about the future of this country, and we know that a national plan will go into place on January 20th for the first time, and I look forward to being a part of that, and we're going to move forward together. And so let's all do this as a team and support one another. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Bajent.
just, you know, everything my colleague said, but to reiterate something I said at one of these ratifications earlier this year, our mayor takes a lot of heat and is in a really tough spot with these decisions, which are big. And I know she takes them very seriously, and she tries very hard to balance all of the interests and make the right call. And inevitably, sometimes some people are unhappy and some people are happy. But I would remind everybody that it's not just the mayor's decision. If this passes tonight, and I expect it will, it's because we agree and we're behind her. We're behind the elderly and the vulnerable people in our community, some of whom are dying. And we are unified as a body behind this mandate or this set of rules as well. We're unified for the sake of our businesses who have really been struggling to balance their economic needs under restrictions in public health, and we're unified behind the mayor in making this decision. So, you know, please remember that we're all trying, we're all working as hard as we can. We all think, I think we will vote tonight. I think we will all agree that this is the best thing, and then it's not just the mayor who needs to be the focal point of people's input on this, because we're all on board with her plan.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did receive an email from a concerned constituent who is an employee who works for an employer who has really minimized the enforcement aspect of this order and was reaching out, wanting some guidance on what kind of protection they might receive. You know, they're concerned that this particular employer is not complying with the order. I, from what I understand, removed distancing signage. And, you know, that brings me to the point that we have individuals who are not living in a privileged way as we council members are, that we we have the option to do this part of our job via Zoom and remain safe, that we have members of our community who are trying to survive, and they have no other option but to go to work. And we do have, at least in this case, at least one employer who is choosing not to comply with the order. And here we have an employee who's at a crossroads as to, do they continue to put themselves in harm's way? What resources do they have if they're let go from their job, or if they choose no longer to work for this employer because of safety concerns? So that's something I think we need to look into as well, is what about those employees who are working for individuals who do not want to comply and are in a situation where they're choosing between that paycheck and then every day for 8 hours a day putting themselves in harm's way. And so I would say to those individuals in the community who feel that they're having to make a sacrifice by wearing a mask when they need to go out into public, think about the individuals who do not have a choice, or they feel that they don't, because it's either that or lose a paycheck, possibly risk being evicted, risk not having the ability to feed themselves or their loved ones. These are all the things that we need to take into consideration. And so I'm hoping that moving forward that we will be able to provide some answers to citizens like that, residents like that, who are put in that situation as essential workers, who prior to the pandemic were already struggling, and now have this added crisis that they have to manage. So I, of course, would be supportive of this tonight, but I do hope that we can come up with some answers for some of those individuals who are running into those difficult decisions.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Halliburton.
there's not a lot that I can add that our other council members haven't already brought up. I really appreciate Councilmember Bajent bringing up our unity behind our mayor in this effort, and the attention that's put on her. But this really is our duty as council members to look out for the public health and safety of the people who live here, and I really think that that's what we're doing here. I appreciate that Councilmember Thompson brought up our patriotic duty of being there for each other. And I would say it's our duty as humans, really, to each other, as well as a patriotic duty. And at the very beginning, when we started talking about masks, I really looked at wearing masks as an act of kindness. And I don't enjoy wearing a mask. I don't know that anybody really does. But when I see somebody else have one on, I know that that person has my back. I know that they're looking out for other people around them. And I think that one of the things that makes Idahoans great is that we take care of our neighbors and we take care of each other. And I would encourage people to look at this way. I also appreciate Council Pro Tem Wooding's point that there are some people who have conditions that don't make it possible for them to wear a mask. And I can't imagine what that would be like now, because I know that there is judgment that goes on when people see somebody not wearing one, and that must be difficult, and the burden that they have to bear. And I think that just holds us all more responsible in what we can do to be protecting them and to be protecting ourselves. And so, of course, I'm going to be voting in favor of this tonight. I appreciate that the mayor put this in place and our opportunity to ratify it.
Thank you. So the comments that I read earlier were from the mayor. I'd like to add just a few of my own. I can't think of anything that more represents Boise kind than wearing a mask right now. It means that you are protecting the people around you, that you care enough about the people around you to do that. I've been in touch with a friend today who just today lost 2 of her uncles to COVID, 2 brothers who died on the same day of this terrible disease. And she's heartbroken and her family's heartbroken. And these are deaths that probably could have been avoided had more people worn a mask more often earlier. And so I very much support this order tonight. I very much understand that there are people who cannot wear masks, and this order does not require them to do that. I also very much understand that there are people who have many concerns about our government, about the way things are working. But I go back to Boise Kind and say, you know, we're in this together. We're in this boat together. I don't want to sink, and I need you all to wear a mask, and I promise you all that I will. And with that, I very much am in support of this as well. We are not taking comment on this particular item, sir. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to add one thing. Right before coming home this afternoon, I stopped by DMV to update my registration for my vehicle. And I was in one of those situations where someone came in after me, and the clerk who was helping me very discreetly called out to a colleague to ask this individual if they needed a mask. And this person was using a wheelchair, and they did. They very graciously asked if they could provide them with a mask. And the individual said that they could wear a mask if they didn't have to cover their nose. And so they agreed. And as we know from all these months of mask etiquette, we need to cover our mouths and our nose to have the best outcome. But at the end of the day, I saw people trying. I saw people respecting each other. I saw the staff at DMV respecting the law. I saw the individual who was asked to wear a mask saying, I can do it to this degree. I saw it working. I saw grace in action. And I think that's, at this point, what we should be striving for. Ideally, it'd be great if everybody had their mouth and their nose covered, but they worked with this individual. They believed her that that's the best she could do with her situation. So it is possible. I thanked the staff at DMV before leaving, thanked them for being mindful about encouraging the public to wear masks, and for working with people when they said that they couldn't 100% comply. So it is possible, and it is happening in our city.
Thank you. Anything further? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next items on our agenda, is the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk shall be considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next order of business is number 7, ordinances, first reading calendar. There are no ordinances on the first reading calendar, so second reading calendar.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
With no objection.
ORD-47-20, an ordinance amending the Boise Development Code, Boise City Code, Title 11, Chapter 3, Section 4, to require design review prior to demolition of structures within existing design review districts, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 48-20, an ordinance repealing the Boise City Fire Prevention Code, Boise City Code Title 5, Chapter 12, and enacting a new Boise City Fire Code Title 5, Chapter 12, including adoption of the 2018 International Fire Code and associated amendments required by the state of Idaho. Also including the adoption of an updated wildland-urban interface map and associated wildland-urban interface standards, using the restrictions on foam, water, fire suppression systems, providing provisions related to control valve and FACP locations, new requirements for spec warehouses, tenant space identification for multi-tenant occupancies and multifamily housing, updating duties and procedures for the Fire Board of Appeals, providing associated penalties, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD 49-20, an ordinance repealing Boise City Code Title I, Chapter 6, Section 3A4, Mayor and City Council salaries, and eliminating the regularly scheduled increase to the mayor's annual salary and providing an effective date. ORD 50-20, an ordinance repealing Boise City Code Title I, Chapter 6, Section 3B4, Mayor and City Council salaries, and eliminating the regularly scheduled increase to the City Council member's annual salary and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Third reading calendar.
Madam Mayor, I move that, can I move that all ordinances on the third reading
You
calendar?
can do them all.
Can I
in
do
one,
that?
yes.
Okay. I move that all items on the third reading calendar be that further reading of all items on, sorry, I'm working through this right now. It's different than my script and it's hard. I move that further reading of all items on the third reading calendar be dispensed with and the record reflect that they have been read the third time in full.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 39-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 1, Boise City Building Code to adopt the 2018 International Building Code, including Appendixes H, signs, Appendix J, grading, and certain amendments to Appendix J, grading, standardizing and correcting terminology, numbering, and code references, updating fee schedule references, flood hazard maps, and flood hazard regulations, and separating the Boise City Building Code into commercial and residential subsections, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 40-20. An ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 1, Boise City Building Code to adopt the 2018 International Residential Code, including Manual J design criteria, standardizing and correcting terminology, numbering, and code references, updating fee schedule references, flood hazard maps, and flood hazard regulations, including Appendix Q, tiny houses, and Appendix S, straw bale construction, and separating the Boise City Building Code into commercial and residential subsections, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 41-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 10, Boise City Building Code to adopt the 2018 International Existing Building Code, which establishes alternative methods and minimum requirements for work associated with existing structures, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 42-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 9, Boise City Energy Conservation Code to adopt the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, associated required state amendments, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 43-20, an ordinance repealing and replacing the Boise City Electrical Code, Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 5, adopting updated administrative provisions, designating the code official, updating Electrical Board of Appeals duties and procedures, establishing criteria for modifications, alternative materials and designs, defining work exempt for permits, requiring dedicated branch circuit that may be used for electrical vehicle charging in residential garage built in conjunction with new construction, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 44-20, an ordinance CAR 20-00010 for property located at 1976 South Century Way, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance, from limited office with design review L-OD to light industrial with design review M-1D, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD 45-20, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Boise City, Idaho, approving the First Amendment to the Urban Renewal Plan, West Side Downtown Urban Renewal Project, which First Amendment seeks to annex certain parcels to existing West Side project area, which First Amendment includes revenue allocation financing provisions, authorizing the city clerk to transmit a copy of this ordinance and other required information to county and state officials and other taxing entities, providing severability, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD 46-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title I, Chapter 16 to allow for the inclusion of temporary expansions of alcohol licensed premises to be included on license renewal applications as is directed by ABC, to clarify the city's authorization to temporarily expand alcohol licensed premises shall end at the sunset date or upon notification from ABC, whichever comes first, to extend the automatic sunset provision to April 30th, 2022, and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ORD 39-20, ORD 40-20, ORD 41-20, ORD 42-20, ORD 43-20, ORD 44-20, ORD 45-20, and ORD 46-20 be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And I think we should give the clerk a round of applause tonight.
Thanks, it was rough.
Two pages and only one stumble? All right, that's pretty good. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is unfinished business, and there is no unfinished business tonight. Next beyond that is new business, and in new business A, we have subdivisions, Dallas Harris South Subdivision Number 2, SUB 20-044, preliminary and final plat. And I'll note for the record that we did receive late correspondence this afternoon from the Neighborhood Association. And Celine, you're up. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, council members. The subdivision before you tonight is for a preliminary and final plat on 10.54 acres in Harris Ranch. It's comprised of 4 buildable lots, which comply with the Harris Ranch specific plan. The lower block of 6 acres are for a mix of uses with neighborhood retail, commercial on the ground floor, and residential uses on the upper floors. You can see here with the 3 different block prototypes within the specific plan that the buildings are placed along the street and vehicular access is limited on just Woodcutter Street. The upper blocks are also mixed use with retail and office on the first floor and residential above. The school site is also planned for the block. There are no plans detailed in the specific plan, as it will require a planning effort with Boise School District and the neighbors and the community. There have been early discussions on site layout, but due to the pandemic, this has been put on pause. The street sections proposed also align with the specific plan, with Barnside being a bit wider to accommodate bike lanes, along with on-street parking and 2 lanes for vehicles. The other roadways are a bit smaller with just on-street parking and 2 travel lanes. The build out of this subdivision won't require any improvements to Warm Springs yet, specifically the roundabouts, but there are RRFBs proposed at the intersections of Old Hickory and Millbrook for an interim safety measure. Also, it's important to add that ACHD Commission approved the recent request from the city to reduce Warm Springs Avenue from 5 lanes to 3 lanes in the master street map. The planning team is now evaluating the next steps in order to have this reflected in the specific plan. In summary, the proposed plat conforms to the Harris Ranch specific plan, and Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval to City Council, and that concludes my presentation.
Any questions for staff? We do have one person in the audience signed up for this. Just a reminder, on agenda items, general speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Comments must pertain to the agenda item and the action being considered by the City Council. Comments or testimony that go beyond the scope of the agenda item will not be received during this time. So I do have a Lee Lay signed up to testify on this item. Lee?
Thank you, Councilwoman. I didn't get a Zoom link back, so I ended up coming in person. In regards to the Harris Ranch subdivision, I have previously worked in that
We
subdivision.
need your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Leland J. Lay, 7109 Northview Street, Boise, Idaho. I'm a heavy construction foreman. The previous, in Harris Ranch, the actual, I have worked in that in that subdivision previously, and Harris Ranch has done a good job with sediment erosion control and things of that nature, and cooperating with the city on those natures. I would like to bring it to the City Council's awareness of Idaho Code, Title 18. Regarding extortion, Section E, the previously, keeping in mind, I have just lost someone to COVID in Alaska who used to work for me.
Sir, we're taking testimony on the item before us.
And I'm testifying as to extortion by the City Council, and this ordinance you just passed, it qualifies as extortion to take this mandate and
Madam
put it
Mayor.
upon people.
Madam Mayor,
Sir,
I
I'm
ask
gonna have to
that-
ask you to,
I'm sure you asked me to strike it from the
Please
record,
stop.
et cetera, blah, blah. But the point being, the point of Boise Kind and these sorts of things is to protect the rights of an individual.
sir, please. We appreciate your passion, but thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm wondering if we should have heard from the applicant,
What's that?
if we should have heard from the applicant as well for the subdivision.
I'm having trouble.
The applicant?
I really, yeah,
Applicant Doug and he.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not get the applicant first. Sorry. Okay, we will now go to the applicant, either Heath Clark or Doug Fowler. Are you there?
Madam Mayor, Heath Clark's here. And I'm very flexible, so we'll go whatever order you want to go with. So Heath Clark on behalf of the applicant, 251 East Front Street in Boise. Saline, as always, did a great job with the presentation. I think the thing that I would just emphasize here is that this is setting the stage for some of the work that will be to come with regard to the school application, which is a separate process. This does create the blocks that will essentially be the palette for that work to occur on. It is completely within all of the requirements of SPO1, so there's no modifications that are being requested here. And we look forward to continuing that, but we appreciate your review of this in the meantime.
Thank you. Doug, did you have anything to add?
No, thank you,
All right.
President Clay.
Questions for the applicant? Heath, Doug, I guess I have a question. The correspondence we received from the Neighborhood Association, and John may address this, have to do with the ultimate design of the bike network, which we know has been an ongoing work in progress. The neighborhood association supports this application, but continues to have concerns with that. I'm assuming that you will continue to work with the neighborhood and other interested parties on that ultimate design.
Madam Mayor, absolutely. And, John, I can see John's got the best background tonight. He wins that award. Well, maybe Saline, I don't know. Saline might have it today. But yes, we've appreciated working with John Mooney and the rest of BVNA. This has been a conversation that's been going on for probably more than a year at this point, I would say, John. And one point that I would make is that Saline pointed to the street sections that were approved with SPO1. So these street sections in this area include some 2-lane collectors with urban sidewalks that do have parking lanes that could be repurposed. They also include when I mentioned the urban sidewalk, we're talking about a 15-foot urban sidewalk, and all of this in the context of a gridded area. And so, yes, certainly things can be tweaked and can be modified to be improved. We think we've always had an open door policy with BVNA, and we've appreciated them, working with us. But we do think that what's there does set the stage for a good collaborative effort.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, with that, Madam Clerk, we'll go to those online. I see John Mooney from the Barber Valley Neighborhood Association. John,
Council President Clegg, John Mooney, council members, John Mooney, 7153 East Highland Valley Road. On behalf of our neighborhood and our board, thanks to Saline for getting this into your packages at the last minute. I hope you had a chance to review our comments briefly, but as Doug and he said, this is a good streetscape. Our letter is it's intended to primarily poke at the bear, which is you didn't get a whole lot of quality feedback from ACHD on what bike infrastructure should be surrounding a school as we build it. Obviously, this will, as Heath just said, the streets that are on the side there, the 2 sides without bike lanes, those will be repurposed. But the question is, we're building it now, so why not consider some best practices? And I agree with Mr. Fowler. Doug and I have talked about this many times. You can't expect a developer to take every Johnny-come-lately good idea and incorporate it into a plan. But we're hoping that the planning staff can expect more out of their partners, in this case, the school district and ACHD, to look at an application and then recommend quality improvements, even though they might be beyond what the specific plan says. In the case of Harris Ranch and the Harris family, we think our impression is that if someone had recommended a higher quality bicycle facility in the area of this elementary school, the applicant probably would have gone and done it, even if it was beyond what was required by your ordinance. And that's a quality developer, and we appreciate that and the partnership we've had. The school district basically signed off on this without any input, and that seems very short-sighted because they know they're going to build something there. It might be delayed for COVID, but it's going to happen. And for them to not take the time to give you, the planning staff, and you, the elected representatives of the city, some quality feedback just doesn't seem right. Finally, our concern, and we've talked to Cody Riddle about this a bit as well, is that we've lived through development under a specific plan, and it provides great predictability for the developer and the new residents. But we're concerned about the rigidity of those plans and specifically for future plans, SPO3 and anything beyond that, and how maybe we can develop a process where best practices can evolve within a specific plan and your hands not be tied by the ordinance. So it's a great plan and we support it. We know we can get this right later, but we're hoping that there's some lessons learned from our experience living through SPO1 and SPO2. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
John, this is Councilmember Halliburton. I know that in the in the letter that you sent over, you had one specific example that you included on there. I was wondering if you had any other specific things that you would like to either have on record or would like to have us know, so as we begin conversations with ACHD, that we can mention those things as well.
Councilmember Halliburton, nothing in specific. I think it's more of a process issue, and I also serve as a bicycle advisory committee member on the ACHD's committee, and I see Ryan's on the call tonight. One of the questions I've been asking for quite a while within ACHD is why can't the project reports that ACHD writes for the jurisdictions, Boise, Meridian, CUNA, Eagle, why can't they provide the applicant or the land use agency, in this case you guys, city, some recommended best practices? And we don't. ACHD doesn't do that. I don't know if it's a process issue internally with ACHD, but I'm trying to work that with just from a bicycle advisory committee perspective. I'm sorry if that didn't answer your question.
No, that's all right. That was good, John.
Any other questions? John, I'll just comment on that real quickly. The Master Streets map is based on the Livable Streets Design Guide. And I've long thought that it's time to take a look at that guide and make some amendments. So as the Bicycle Advisory Committee does their work, you might take a look at that. All right, thank you. Anything further? Well, this was not a public hearing, so I don't need to close it, but I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve the Dallas Harris South Subdivision Number 2 SUB 20-44 Boise City Preliminary Final Plat SUB oh, never mind. 3850 East Warm Springs Avenue.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Now we are to public hearings. Number 1 on the public hearing calendar is a proposed exchange of city-owned real property located at 5357 North Collister Drive in Boise, Idaho, Ada County, Idaho, 0.4 acres for adjacent real property, 3.17 acres, and a resolution 5720. Sarah Arkle is here to present.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. So the public hearing that we are opening tonight, and I'll provide a little context here from an open space and trails perspective, is a second in a two-part process to surplus property. That quarter acre that Madam Mayor mentioned is adjacent to North Collister Road. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Here's North Collister Road, and the 3.17 acres that's owned currently by a private entity is directly adjacent to Polecat Reserve. The proposed exchange that this surplus would facilitate is a condition of approval for the Collister Lofts development. So I am happy to provide some context as to why we believe this is in the public interest to exchange this property. And then if you have any questions related to the planning and development side of this process, I'm hopeful that Cody will be able to provide the answers for that. So just to orient you very quickly, the project area, so to speak, is in between the intersection of Hill Road and Collister Drive and the existing trailhead at the end of Collister Drive. The blue property in blue here is parcel A in your packet. It is the city-owned property, that quarter of an acre that we are surplusing, seeking to surplus in order to exchange for the green property, which is about 3 acres and directly adjacent to Polecat. The surplus that would facilitate the exchange would allow us to build a neighborhood trail connection closer to the communities that we are serving. And that is what this yellow line depicts, is just a conceptual trail at this point. We've been working with Briar Hill and Quail Ridge neighborhood associations to try and address increased trailhead use and increased traffic on the Collister Road. We're hopeful that improving neighborhood connectivity and offering trail users an opportunity to hop on a trail closer to the intersection of Hill Road and Collister Drive will alleviate some of those problems. So following tonight's public hearing, the next step would be council consideration of an exchange agreement. And then our team would continue to work with the developer and the neighborhood associations in the surrounding community to identify a sustainable trail route that protects the privacy of folks who would live within the canyon and also protects our natural resources. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Sarah?
Madam
Sarah,
Mayor.
I actually do have a question. We received late correspondence, and I'm sorry, I only saw it after I got here tonight, so I couldn't talk to you beforehand about it, but it makes the point that the parcel A was originally purchased with Foothills Open Space Levy funding, and that there's a fear that there's a precedent of exchanging levy-funded property for other property if we don't note what the public purpose is. It just says that it's in the public purpose. And I wondered if you had any comment on that, or if you'd thought about anything we might add to the resolution that would clarify why we think that it is in the best interest of the public to make this kind of an exchange.
Madam Mayor, council members, yes, I can provide a little bit of information, and I think the subsequent exchange agreement that would be before you this month would provide additional context. The way that these sorts of transactions have been dealt with in the past by the mayor and council is to address them on a case-by-case basis. We have done an exchange similar to this in the past. The one that comes up to my most recent memory was in 2016 at Military Reserve. And mayor and council have decided in that case, and potentially again in this case, that the public benefit is greatly enhanced by that exchange. And when we talk about specific to criteria, it really is to the letter of the levy language, both for the 2001 Foothills levy and the 2015 Open Space and Clean Water levy. If we are improving the open space conservation and trails opportunities with an exchange of this sort, mayor and council have decided that it is worth doing. So we can definitely look at the exchange agreement and make sure that we are articulating clearly what conservation benefits are enhanced through this exchange. And you would see that hopefully within the next few weeks.
Thank you. Would you object if we added a phrase at the end of section 2 that just says that exchanging the property for the adjoining property as it is depicted is in the public interest and in keeping with the interests of the serial levy funding? Or
No, Madam Mayor, I would not object.
would be, just so we recognize that that's a question we ask before we approve this. Okay, thank you. I don't have anyone signed up in the meeting room, so we'll take the folks who signed up online first, and then we'll ask if anyone in the room is interested.
Council President, do we want to hear from the applicants?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the city was the applicant in this case. I guess from the property owner.
Property owner,
Yes,
excuse me.
let's hear from the property owner first. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I don't believe the property owner has joined us tonight.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I did have one question for Sarah. I couldn't quite sneak in. May I ask it now?
Go ahead, Councilmember Bajan.
Sarah, I just wanted to know what, if anything, we would be able to do with the land we're proposing swapping away. It's down on the road, it's tight, it's narrow. We're looking at trading it for a much more sizable piece in the foothills that just by area is more preservation. It's also probably more suitable for trails. But what if anything would we be able to do with that piece down on the road?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, thank you. When we originally conceived of this potential exchange 2 years ago, we looked at whether or not that strip of land was serving any current public purpose or whether it could serve future public purpose. And the grade and topography and ownership in that area wouldn't allow us to build a trail connection from that spot. We would need to climb up the hills in order to get out of the visual range of the folks who live in the canyon. So in identifying this particular area as an area of surplus, we have designated it as underutilized or unutilized.
Thank you. That really helps with the public purpose element that we were talking about before, and it makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
Okay. No one else online. Is there anyone in the room that would wish to testify? Reminding you that you must testify on this issue. Thank you.
Leland Lay, I recently surveyed that whole area, the recent Polecat subdivision that was just put in. And my question is to, what's her name, Sarah? Sarah, the parcel A, which the city currently owns, what do you see the owner's future purpose for that parcel being? It appears that it would most likely become an earth moving project for me, and I would put new houses on there. And in trade for the lots up above, again, that whole area is wildly steep, and the section which the city is trading for is undevelopable land due to the steepness of the terrain. So it would seem he's giving away nothing for something. There must be a benefit to him. What do you see happening there, Sarah?
Thank you. We typically don't address questions to staff, but I think in this case,
is Sarah staff?
what you're asking is what is the public benefit? And,
yeah, is she a representative of the owner? Or
no,
she's yours?
staff. She's
Okay.
Boise City staff. So
Right.
I would ask Sarah to just restate the public benefit of the small parcel for the much bigger parcel and the trail connection.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to. The portion of property that the city is proposing to exchange, a small area of it will be used to enhance access to the proposed development, all of which is lined out in the approved preliminary plat. It was mainly a condition requested by the fire department to make sure that they had adequate access, egress and ingress should fire access be needed. I guess in terms of what the developer is getting out of this is appropriate access. What the city is getting out of this is a new opportunity for a neighborhood trail connection in an area where we're seeing ever increasing use, and an opportunity to build a trail. And yes, it will have a number of switchbacks, and we are going to have to work with the developer on some potential hardscaping and steps to make sure that we're building things that are sustainable. And they are willing to put that infrastructure in, all of which would be part of the exchange agreement that will come to you in the subsequent weeks. So it's sort of a partnership where we get an opportunity to provide this additional neighborhood access, which I can't really underscore how crucial that is, especially at a time when we're seeing trail use triple. Having an opportunity for folks to sort of diversify their access points really helps with communities that are living next to trailheads, and also helps with the pressure that's on our current trailheads to meet the demand. So we wouldn't have an opportunity to pull a trail down to Collister Road, closer down to the intersection of Hill and Collister if it wasn't for this potential exchange.
Thank you for the question. I think it helped us clarify what the public
can I
purpose
follow up
is.
at all on that? So it's for fire access. Is that the thought that there was going to be future parking there too as part of the trailhead?
So those are really questions of the subdivision plat, which we have considered at another time. And yes, there was a lot of discussion about access, both for fire and,
right.
but mainly what the city gets back is trail access. Appreciate your
Thank you.
interest. Thank you. All right, we have no one else in the room, no one else online. So with that, I'll close the public hearing. And what's the pleasure of council?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve RES 570-20, a resolution declaring certain city-owned real property at 5357 North Collister Drive as underutilized and exchanging the property and with the addition of section 2, referencing the funding source of the Foothills Serial Levy, and that this exchange has benefit for the public good.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Madam
Madam
Mayor,
Mayor.
oh, sorry, go Jimmy.
Councilmember Thompson. Which one?
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, mine will be quick. I just wanted to thank Sarah for the hard work she's put into this, as well as other members of the department and staff. This is a really great job, Sarah. And that last response you gave to the citizens' question was really spot on. And I think we could just use that video clip to explain it. This swap going forward, it was outstanding, but mostly trail system.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Halliburton.
I just wanted to chime in on some of the public good that we're looking at here. One of the great advantages to this is that people have the ability to leave their houses and go for a run or go for a bike ride without having to get in their car, which is such a great amenity that so many folks don't have the opportunity to do. And those who do not have to drive to go for a run or drive to go to a bike ride truly understand. And so I think this is a great thing to have in this part of town and to continue to explore in other areas as well. So I think it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Anyone else?
Madam
Council
Mayor.
President Pro Tem Woodings.
I want to thank everyone for hanging in with my very messy motions tonight. I'm not sure why everything turns into word salad in my mouth, but it is. And I want to just echo thanks for Sarah. She has been doing an incredible job really putting together the puzzle pieces up in the foothills so that we can have a really great trail system with multiple access points so that more of our citizens can take access to our trails without driving, which I think is really great. So thank you so much, Sarah. And I think that this seems like a really good deal to me. We get a really great trail access. We get some additional land where we'll have permanent trail that's city owned. And I think it's a win-win. So thank you for that.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just received a text message from a constituent who lives in the Collister area who said that she tried to testify via Zoom, raised her hand, but was not acknowledged. So I don't know how we want to handle situations like that.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. We'll look into that and see if we can get her on. I can reopen the public hearing.
Council President, there was no hand up when you asked. There is now a hand up after we had closed the public hearing. So if you would like to reopen.
With that, I will reopen the public hearing and we'll hear from the member of the public.
It is Esther. Is it Siha?
Correct. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome, Esther. I think the clerk is working to get you in where you can testify.
We should now be able to hear her.
Okay, Esther, if you'll unmute, we should be able to hear you. Oh, I guess you were unmuted. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I logged on and I raised my hand before, so I'm not sure what happened. Thank you for reopening the public hearing. My name is Esther Seha. I reside at 3901 North Cambria Way, Boise. I reside within the boundaries of the Collister Neighborhood Association. Today, I am providing comment as a longtime resident of the Collister neighborhood. So I just wanted to thank the city for this opportunity in creating a trailhead access closer by at least a half mile or so to residents that live down on the flat end of Collister. However, I must say that in looking at the City Council's agenda yesterday was the first time I knew of this proposal. I do want to point out a couple of things. Sarah mentioned that the city, that she had been working with Briar Hill and Quail Ridge. Those are homeowner associations. Those homeowner associations lie within the boundaries of the Collister Neighborhood Association. And so I would just encourage the city, as you work on this proposal and any other future proposals adjacent to or within the boundaries of the Collister Neighborhood Association, that you reach out to the other residents that live within those boundaries as well, so that all residents close to that area have an opportunity to participate in this process. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. That's a point well taken. And I know, we try hard to make sure and get the appropriate notice out, but if we missed it here, we'll try to do better next time. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the record, I will be forwarding the text messages that I received from Ms. Seha to our admin for record keeping.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, I will reclose the public hearing. Unless we see another hand, we have no other hand. Okay, thank you. And we do have a motion on the floor. I won't restate it. We've had a second and discussion on the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Item 2 on public hearings is CUP 20-43 Maverick Towers, 1500 East Wright Street. Conditional use permit for a special exception for an 85-foot tall wireless communication monopole on 5.3 acres in an R1C zone. Cody, you are here to present, I believe.
Yep. Madam Mayor, members of council, can you hear me okay?
We can. Welcome.
And you can see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Kind of in a little different format again here, but aren't we all? This item before you this evening is a request for approval of a special exception to construct an 85-foot tall wireless communication facility. The installation is proposed on a 5-acre parcel that's located at 1500 East Wright Street in an R1C or single-family residential zone. This is actually not a new facility for this property. Rather, it's a request to replace an existing 80-foot tall pole with one designed as a pine tree. As you can see on the site plan, it will actually be relocated to the center of the site, which allows it actually to be better concealed with landscaping and existing trees. The old pole on the site will be removed. The new pole and associated equipment will occupy about 880 square feet in an enclosure at the middle of the church parking lot. The pole will be located about 135 feet from the church building and roughly 180 feet from the nearest single-family home. We do normally look for these towers to be placed, in industrial or commercial areas. Unfortunately, that's not always feasible. It is because of the height and the residential zoning that you're seeing this application. It's actually very similar to one that council approved on this very site in 2009. As you can see from the coverage maps, the installation of this pole will result in measurable improvement in service. I would also note that the exchange of these towers, the new facility will be able to support an additional three carriers on the site, which is certainly always encouraged. The Planning Commission did unanimously recommend approval of this installation without opposition at that time. Since then, we did receive a letter expressing concerns from a nearby resident. I believe their concerns were primarily associated with impacts on their views to the foothills. I think it's fair to say you will in fact see the installation. However, as I mentioned before, it's not an entirely new facility or new impact on views. Shifting it to the east, again, they're simply shifting it to the east and removing that old pole. That actually places it further away from the closest homes. Finally, the design as a pine tree will also help conceal the facility, especially when viewed at a distance. It was for those reasons that the commission did recommend approval of the installation, and we are recommending you do the same this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Cody?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have a question for Cody.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thanks, Cody. I really, really like that this is one of those pine tree designs. There's one of those out here my way. It's come up before, and I've expressed my my big support for this type of pole. And I just was wondering, is this something that is optional and just the individual installing it decides, hey, this is something I'm going to do and make it one of these tree looking poles, or is it, I've always wondered if this is something that we could consider looking at some point as a council, and they're making it more of a mandate. It's just such a different in sightliness, and again, I'm a big proponent of these, and I don't see enough of them. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, to answer your question, it's not required. In these situations, especially in areas where you kind of have a gap in service or coverage and it's a residential setting, we work with the carriers and encourage this sort of thing. But you're right, we haven't seen many of them. I would note that we are just starting to look at changes or updates to our wireless communication ordinance. Technologies have changed a lot, frankly, since the code was drafted. And so this sort of thing, along with some of the advances in technology that you've all heard a lot about lately with the 5G technology, is an opportunity to look at that, and that's certainly something we could take into account when we explore that amendment.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that, and I hope we do. I really think they're great. Thanks.
Thank you. Council President Pro Tem Whittings.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Cody, this is not completely related to the cell tower that we're looking at, but I just had a question about the tax revenue side. So since this is in a church parking lot, I'm wondering how this facility is treated for taxes. Is it tax exempt like the church property would be, or is there some other way that we treat that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Whittings, I honestly wouldn't be able to answer that question. Perhaps the applicant, who I believe is here this evening, could speak to how that works. Sorry.
All right, we'll ask the applicant to address that if they can. Any further questions for Cody? If not, we will go to the applicant, who is Andy Kako from Maverick Tower. Andy.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Andy Cockle, 1815 North 11th Street, Boise, Idaho. Yes, we are proposing an 85-foot monopine type wireless telecom facility at 1500 East Wright Street. We started this process by notifying 163 surrounding property owners in early September. When conducted an outdoor meeting on September 15th. We had 2 participants show up out of the 163 people that were notified. One of those people was a member of SENA, the Southeast Neighborhood Association, and she recommended that I present to the SENA board, which I did on September 24th, and answered any of their questions. There wasn't a lot of concerns at that time. We then proceeded to the Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission on November 2nd and received unanimous support and recommendation to the City Council for approval. I did not get a chance to speak with the neighbor that responded, I believe, to city staff, Ethan. She did not contact me directly. I believe she was outside of the notice radius. I did take a look at her address. She's approximately 665 feet away from the location where we're proposing the tower. So there was ample time, I guess, to get involved. I didn't hear from her. If I had, I would have addressed her concerns up front. As Cody stated, though, we are replacing an existing pole that was abandoned by a company called Clearwire. They were a wireless broadband provider that went out of business, I believe, in 2012. So I believe the new design of a monopine will, like I said, accommodate multiple tenants and not require additional towers in the area. And it's in regards to 5G and small cells, a lot of people have asked me why this can't be covered through small cells. I'd like to just state that they work in conjunction with these macro sites. The macro sites provide kind of a larger area of coverage, and then the small cell 5G sites come in and kind of fill in the nooks and crannies with the density for all the new technologies that we're seeing come out these days. So we agree with planning staff recommendations, our planning commission's recommendation for approval. We agree to all the conditions of the approval, and we're here tonight seeking your approval. So I will stand for any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. And did you have an answer for Council President Pro Tem Wooding's question?
In my experience, each jurisdiction is different when it comes to taxing cell towers. I have received tax notices in different counties and cities. It doesn't usually fall on the property owner that we have an agreement with. It usually falls on my company, Maverick Towers, to be responsible for those taxes. So any increase to the property taxes, which are tied to, fall to me to pay those taxes.
Thank you. So Cody, I guess back to you. The question would be, do we have a way to record these kinds of carve-outs in otherwise tax-exempt properties to notify the assessor that this 880 square feet exist?
Madam Mayor, that's something, I guess that's a new one on me this evening. That's something we'd have to research and could certainly report back to council on what we find.
Okay, thank you. Legal counsel is nodding that that's something we can look at. Any further questions of Mr. Kako? Okay, no one in the room has signed up, so we'll go to those online first. We have a Bryant Burke, I believe.
And Madam Mayor, that individual is not online this evening.
Okay.
And I don't have anybody else that has raised their hand, but if somebody would like to speak, if they would raise their hand, then we can acknowledge them.
If you're online and you'd like to speak to this, please raise your hand so the clerk can see you. Again, we have no one raising their hand. Is there anyone in the audience that would wish to speak to this? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And what's the pleasure of council?
Madam Mayor, I move approval of CUP 20-43 Maverick Towers, 1500 East Wright Street, conditional use permit for a special exception for an 85-foot tall wireless communication monopole on 5.3 acres in an R1C zone.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. We have 2 items left. We usually take a break at about an hour and a half. If we took a 5-minute break now, we could probably get through the last 2 items. Otherwise, we'll be near the end of the 2 hours. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay. Okay, well, I'm kind of getting the hang of how we do this anyway. All right, we are back. Thank you. It looks like everyone's back, at least from the city council perspective. We are now on public hearing number 3, which is DRH 20-434, Robin Gates, 2115 Heights Drive, a request to remove the property from the historic district boundary in the R1CH overlay zone. And Josh, I think you're here to present.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. The subject property that has requested removal from the boundaries of the North End Neighborhood Association is located at the intersection of North Heights Drive and 8th Street, near the eastern edge of the North End Historic District. The property itself does not have frontage on 8th Street, but rather is tucked away on Heights Drive, away from the other properties that they're generally located within the North End Historic District. You'll see that those properties along 8th Street do all have some sort of presence or frontage on 8th Street and are part of that district. This subject property is more naturally part of that Heights Drive neighborhood that extends to the east along Heights Drive, creating somewhat of an irregular protrusion of the historic district to the east encompassing this property. The applicant has provided some visuals which demonstrate the disconnect from 8th Street and the rest of the historic district in the area. This photo is at the intersection of 8th Street and Heights Drive. The subject home is circled in blue and is a ways up the hillside. Again, another view from 8th Street showing the property set back distinctly from 8th Street up the hill, not really having a presence or a frontage on 8th Street like the other properties in the district. So this is the subject house. The applicant, as discussed in the project report, did apply to renovate and expand the home with the Historic Preservation Commission a couple of years ago and received approval. During that process, it was really brought to their attention the irregularity of this home being included in the historic district, and ultimately the property owner decided to move forward with an attempt to remove the property from the historic district. The home is non-contributing. It was constructed outside of the period of significance for the historic district, and thus has some slightly relaxed regulation in terms of development of the property that the Historic Preservation Commission would review. So in summary, the Historic Preservation Commission did approve the application for removal from the historic district at their October 26th hearing. If City Council were to approve the application tonight, and rezone ordinance would be required, which would then be placed on the council reading calendar for formal adoption. And with that, I would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Are there any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Council President Pro Tem Whittings.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. I used to actually live on Heights Drive. It's a neat little neighborhood and all built kind of in the middle of the century. I'm curious, on a property like that wasn't built during the period of significance, if the owner demolished that home, would they then have to build a home that is more in line with the period of significance in the North End Historic District? How does that work?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Whittings. So we, in historic districts, don't like to replicate history. There are a number of findings in the residential historic guidelines that talk about compatibility in terms of massing, placement of the building on the lot, height, things like that, that generally would make the property compatible and integrate into the historic district. But in terms of specifying a style that it would have to, replicate some sort of historic structure, that would actually be discouraged. New construction should be separate and distinct from the historic properties.
All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Halliburton.
Thank you. Josh, you said that if it was taken out of the historic overlay, then there would have to be another vote for the rezone. Would the rezone just be whatever it is now, single family residential without the historic overlay, or would it be up for, I guess, a potential different zoning that was proposed by the landowner?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, so it would just be the R1C designation minus the H. So, technically it is a rezone, so therefore we have to draft a rezone ordinance that would go on the consent calendar, the 3 readings calendar, just like any other ordinance.
Sure,
thank you. If they desire to change that zone to something different, an R2 or an R3, that would absolutely require an entire process through Planning and Zoning Commission and then City Council.
Gotcha.
Anyone else? Josh, I have a quick question. So given the sort of irregular shape of this particular lot, if this is removed from the historic district and the owner wanted to build a structure on what is now the back portion of the lot that faces 8th Street, what would be the regulating ordinance, if any, for how that would integrate with the structures on 8th Street?
Madam Mayor, that would just have to comply with setbacks and height. This is a little bit of a tricky lot in terms of measuring setbacks, but there are some standards and ordinance for properties where the rear property line is not a single line that is parallel to the street. So we would use those measurements to determine a rear lot line. And then the home would have to comply with the setback standards of the R1C zone, which would be 15 feet in the rear and then 5 feet on that side property line, which would be the south. And then it would have to comply with the height limit of the R1C zone, which is 35 feet. I will add that this property is in the hillside and would have to receive hillside approval as well for any new construction, and has in the past on the previous proposal.
Okay, so the fact that it's along Heights Drive and also on 2 sides, the back side of it is still considered a rear setback and would only require a 15-foot setback.
Madam Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, I will now go to the applicant, who is Robin Gates. Robin, are you online?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Robin.
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
So I'm just here hoping that you guys will support Planning and Zoning's recommendation that we be approved to be removed from the historical boundary. And the historical committee actually, in the last hearing, said, and it might not be the exact words, but said this property should have never been included in that boundary. And all we're asking for is to be zoned compatibly with our neighbors on Heights Drive. We're not asking for anything different. We're just wanting to be held to the same design standards as everybody around us. And otherwise, I think Josh covered everything, and I know it's been a late night. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Stand by.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, wait, here we go. Councilmember Halliburton.
Yeah, sorry, just one quick question. I saw in the packet that there had been a approved plan for the building once already and approved in the historic overlay zone. Is it that same plan that you're wanting to put forward, or is the reason to get off of that historic overlay because there's a different plan that you're wanting to put forward now?
It's basically what happened is the appraiser wants us to have a garage as opposed to parking. So we need to modify it a little bit, which is a reason to go forward. But I've been approved for my original design. I happen to be an architect, so I got approved for the design through planning and zoning. It got appealed, it got approved. I've been approved for the ADU that I wanted to have in there and approved for Hillside. And then had the appeal for Hillside, got that approved at the same week that the bank came back and said, you need to put a garage in there. So
Gotcha.
that's where I'm at right now. So I know that you guys have seen this coming through your paperwork quite a bit over the years, but hopefully this is it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just the ability to put it in the garage, if it was not in the historic overlay, would make it much simpler and easier to do that. Is that correct?
Perhaps, but more so is just to be held to the same design standards as our neighbors. Our house is not historical by anybody that I've heard talk about our house. And as you saw from the picture, it really doesn't have any redeeming qualities. So I just like to be held to the same design standards as everybody else in the neighborhood.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Please.
Any other questions? All right, stand by, Robin. If I guess there's no rebuttal on this, but if there's other questions.
Okay.
I don't have anyone signed up in person, so we will go to those who've signed up online. And the first person listed is Eric Stormer. Is Eric here?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. I appreciate the time this evening. Okay. Good evening, Mayor McLean, members of the Boise City Council. My name is Eric Stormer.
We're having trouble hearing
23 North Heights.
Closer to your mic again.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Let me get a little closer. Let's drive. I'm an immediate neighbor to this project, and I'm one of 5 immediate neighbors of which oppose the project. We oppose both the project and the removal of this site from the historic district. You know, we all share the belief that the historic district is something one should contribute to, not try to figure out how to financially benefit from. So I apologize that we're having this discussion this evening. I follow most of you on social media, and I realize you've been dealing with some really pressing issues this year, far more important than that of a single family home issue in the North End. But since we're here and you're going to make a critical decision, I thought it prudent to share some facts. So let's talk about the facts. Ms. Robin Gates is a known architect. She was quick to point out that she's an architect who knows the system well and is one that has spun the facts to her benefit over the years. She's been working on this project for many, many years. And what she's trying to build is a 3-story unit with 3 separate entrances with 3 separate kitchens. She proposed this, it was rejected. She was required to revise this in 2018, and what she got approved was a 3-story unit with 2 kitchens. Now, she never built this. The permit expired over the summer, so what she did was she resubmitted revised drawings this past summer, yet again, including in those drawings a 3rd kitchen on the 3rd floor with a separate entrance. I don't think it's unreasonable to call what Ms. Gates has proposed is a multi-family triplex. 3 floors, 3 kitchens, 3 separate entrances. So while this project will not only be a multi-family triplex, it will also raise the roof of her structure over the height of the telephone pole in her yard. This will effectively block the views of all 5 direct neighbors. Now, the character of this neighborhood is single-story houses tucked into the hillside so that we can all share in the views. My immediate neighbor directly uphill looks clear over my roof straight onto the city of trees. And while we're talking about trees, I get to watch my neighbors They plant native trees with the goal of enhancing the character of the neighborhood. And then I look down to Miss Gates's property where she has systematically removed every single tree from her yard. I don't even know if there's another house in the North End that has removed every single tree. Not the kind of decision you want unfettered in this environment. So while this may be legal in Idaho, if we have learned anything this past year, what is legal and what is in the interest of the greater good are not always in alignment. Sometimes our leaders need to provide a guiding hand for those less inclined to think of the well-being of others. Mayor McLean, members of the City Council,
Time is up.
this is one of those times. I'm sorry, was I running over?
Thank you. Thank you. I messed up. I forgot to get the neighborhood association first. And Sherry Tazo, I believe you're on the line for the North End Neighborhood Association.
I am. Can you hear me, Madam Mayor?
Yes, I can. Welcome, and sorry I messed up.
No problem at all. Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Sherry Batazzo. I'm here as the designated representative for the North End Neighborhood Association. My address for the record is 311 North 23rd Street in Boise, 83702. I will just say that we had gone on record at the Historic Preservation Commission meetings supporting the applicant. I believe that the quote she was referencing was, "The house appeared to be an outlier and may have been erroneously added to the district." So we did support the request. The information that I just heard does sound like new information to me that I wasn't aware of. But I will just say that we had previously gone on record and remain on record that we support the removal. And that's all.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Sherry? Josh, I guess a question of you. If a building were proposed for this site, regardless of whether it was in the historic district or not, that would in fact be a triplex, would it be approved?
Madam Mayor, regardless of the historic designation, a triplex in this zone would require a conditional use permit. There is an approved ADU on the property, so there are 2 approved dwelling units, but not 3, and that would require a public approval process.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Madam Mayor, may I
Council
follow up to your
President Pro Tem.
question? And Josh, what would be the height limit without a conditional use permit on this property?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, that would be 35 feet. And that again is regardless of historic district or not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Now we will go on to the next person signed up on the from the member of the public, Roberta Renee.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Roberta.
Thank you. So I'd like to start by apologizing to Robin for my comments. Robin's a good person. She's a good neighbor, and I will never forget her kindness towards me when I was going through cancer treatment. So this isn't about Robin, it's about the project. The project concerns me because, in part, the historic district issue. I don't understand why homeowners can be allowed to ask to be removed from the historic district. You're either in the historic district or you're not. It's like being a little bit pregnant. I don't like the precedent this sets, and a rhetorical question, if people can opt out of the historic district, what protection does it really provide? The project also obstructs or completely removes the view from at least 5 homes in the Heights Drive neighborhood. These neighbors' property values are in part derived from having a view. Again, I don't like the precedent this sets. I also know from personal experience that Heights Drive is on a shifting soil sand base, and a 3-story home on the downward slope of this piece of geology concerns me from a safety standpoint.
Thank you. Brevity is always welcome. Any questions for Roberta? Hearing none, we have a Mark signed up. We don't have a last name.
I don't have anybody signed up with that name.
Okay, we don't see a Mark. If you are there and you'd like to speak later, just raise your hand.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just in response to one of Roberta's questions, Josh, you mentioned earlier that this lot would require a hillside building permit regardless of its historic designation or not.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Whittings, that is correct. And as part of that review, there are geotechnical reports and experts that weigh in on the suitability of the lot for building.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have another question, maybe for staff.
Sure, Councilmember Halliburton.
So I'm just kind of curious as far as the decision that we're making. Right now, it's being asked to take off of the historic overlay. And I guess what I'm wondering is, are we basing 100% of our decision on whether or not this belongs in the historic overlay? Or is part of our decision based off of what this opens the doors to in the future, or what the development is going to look like? Because my understanding is that if there is a proposal going forward for a triplex or whatever it would be, that would actually be heard in a different city council session. But what we're making a decision based off of right now is strictly on whether or not it belongs in a historic overlay. I just want to make sure that I'm correct in my thinking.
Thank you. Yeah, Josh, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, absolutely. The matter before you is whether or not the property belongs in the historic district. Any other entitlements, including what is ultimately built on the lot, has to follow the zoning code in order to be approved.
Thank you. Josh, while we're stopped here, I'll ask one more question that may clarify this even a bit further. As I understand it, there was already an approval on this lot while it was in the historic district that would have spurred the concerns we've heard tonight. And so regardless of being in the historic district or not in the historic district, that approval was granted based on the underlying zone, not on the historic designation.
Madam Mayor, you are correct in that the project that the neighbors have referenced was approved while the property was within the historic district. It was found to comply with those residential guidelines and was approved while the property was part of the historic district. Correct.
Thank you. All right.
You're fine.
Any other questions? With that, we'll go on to Danielle Tomina.
No, the Italian.
Good evening. I'm Daniele Tonina at 2213 North Heights Drive, Boise, and I'm one of the neighbor. So one thing that I wanted to point out is that I support sustainable neighboring friendly development, which maintain and enhance the quality of living and belonging to the North End. Reviewing the plans of where the property is located, I feel like that when the planners decided that this property belonged to the historic district was for several reasons, which some of them may include. The site is highly visible within the historic district, looking toward the historic district from outside the historic district and from Camel's Back Park, a popular and iconic public location. It is located right at the gateway from the north end to the trails of 8th Street. Thus, I believe that the property will remain as an integral part of the historic.
I understand they do not like this project because it's going to block their view.
The charm.
Oh, I'll go on there.
But I have every right.
Somebody else was also talking.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was the point that I want to make. I think one of the reasons that the property is a part of the north of the historic district is because it has a prominent visibility. Is a little bit raised up to a street, but you can see that a lot from a lot of positions within the historic district, both coming down from a street, coming up from a street, but also from a lamp, which is one of the road that connect East Street to Camel's-Back. And that is the end of my testimony.
Thank you. Any questions for Daniel? I see none. Thank you so much. Next is Robert Neely. Robert doesn't seem to be here, so we'll move to Steve Clayton.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Steve Clayton. I live at 2207 North Heights Drive, directly east of the proposed project. Before sharing my testimony, I want to thank Mayor and Council for your leadership during these difficult times with COVID. I was moved by your comments earlier tonight and recognize what we're discussing here now is small compared to those challenges. In that context, I will share my comments. I'm opposed to approval of the applicant's request to be removed from the historic district. Although the driveway to the house does enter from Heights Drive from many vantage points around the Heights Drive neighborhood and the foothills, including views from Camel's-Back Park, the house is highly visible, and therefore the property should remain part of the historic district. I've lived in my house since 2010, and starting in March 2018, I've been opposed to the applicant's permits to the Historic Preservation Commission for this project. My concerns and those of our neighbors, such as the massing of the proposed house, are documented in a letter of protest I emailed the Plan Development Services Director Levine on June 29, 2020, the copies to Council President Clegg and the Mayor's office. More recently, on October 5th, I also testified Planning and Zoning Commission against approval of the hill slope permit due to inadequate geotechnical analysis. I shared copies of both these documents with the council members and mayor this morning. After seeing testimony from the October 26th Historic Preservation Commission hearing, I decided to testify this evening. Throughout this long process, starting in 2018, the applicant has continued to revise the design, but information provided to PDS and neighbors has been misleading at times. For example, the first public notice described the design changes as increasing the house to 1.5 stories only. Next, submitted drawings lack details showing the elevations and heights of the structure, and subsequent renderings suggested the structure will not be as tall or massive as the drawing suggests. Now I understand still more changes are planned. In recent testimony to the commission, the applicant stated there was going to be no effect to neighbors in the north end that were asking, in the neighborhood we're asking to get removed from. This misleading half-truth fails to acknowledge the significant and lasting direct effects this project will cause the Heights Drive neighborhood and indirect effects to the larger north end, including the historic district. Furthermore, if one reads the hearing minutes, the applicant fails to directly answer questions of the commissioners and the North Head Neighborhood Association president regarding a reason for wanting to be removed from the historic district. As we discussed tonight, if the applicant has already been removed, been through the process, has approved permits in hand, why does the applicant want to be removed from the historic district? I encourage the council to deny this application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you. That's everyone I have signed up. If anyone else online would like to testify, would you please raise your hand and let the clerk know? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who would wish to testify? Sir?
Leland Lay, 7109 Northview. Thank you for this opportunity. I see the property in question on my Google map. There are many properties next to it that are multi-dwelling and much older than what would be considered historic. So I'm wondering, as a part of the historic district, what role it has significantly as a historic district member. I see the house itself probably looks like it was made in the 20s, but if that has already been approved to go away.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. So this is not an appeal. There's no rebuttal. Are there any further questions of staff?
Madam Mayor, I guess I have got one more question just for some clarity.
Go ahead, Councilmember Halliburton.
So this is probably for staff. So it's considered a non-contributing building that was done in a survey in 1999. Is that why, because it's non-contributing, the plans have already gotten approved in the past? That there's nothing really, since it isn't contributing, there's nothing preventing it from getting these things approved?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, in essence, yes. So there are differing rules in terms of what can be done to a non-contributing structure. So when we look at contributing versus non-contributing, a contributing structure, the character defining facade would have to remain intact, and we would have to keep the characteristics of that home. Where this one is non-contributing, the rules are much less strict. The home can be significantly altered and not be required to keep those historic elements. Yes.
And so follow up to that, and I didn't answer or ask that very well, but you answered it perfectly. So thank you. So what's the difference then between it being non-contributing in the historic district and being removed from the historic district?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, there are processes that do add some time and application. So, even though it's non-contributing, when the new home is proposed, that does require approval by the Historic Preservation Commission. If this was a standard R1C property outside the historic district, and the proposed structure complied with all setbacks, height limits, all the components of the zoning code, then it would just be a building permit application. So the historic designation does add some process and required public hearings.
Yep. And so just to reiterate that, it's additional steps in the process, but not necessarily restrictions on what can be built and what can't be built.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Council President Pro Tem Woodings.
I'm going to put a motion on the table. And I'm guessing that if people are feeling the same way that I am, we're going to have some discussion here. I'm going to move that we deny DRH 20-434 the request to remove 2115 Heights Drive from the historic district boundary in an R1CH.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Madam Mayor, I was pretty torn on this one. And in addition to having lived on Heights Drive while I was a senior in college, which were some pretty fun times, I've also lived in about 10 different rentals within about a mile of that spot. And I see both sides. I see how that lot is perceived to really connect with the Heights neighborhood, but I also appreciate that lot's prominence from the 8th Street side, particularly from some of the lower streets and coming up 8th Street. So I guess I'm a little bit torn, but I think that that lot was likely included in the historic overlay because of its prominence, because it has so high visibility from 8th Street and some of those lower streets. And without some, overreaching design requirements, which Josh has outlined, there wouldn't be a requirement to make it look period appropriate for the historic district. There's an appreciation for, adding interest and adding more modern buildings in a historic district. I think that kind of outweighs the Heights Drive neighborhood piece for me, because I think it can be both, but I think that keeping it in the historic district makes it both.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Bajent.
I see two different questions here. The first is, does this property belong in the historic district according to the historic district criteria? And the second is, does what the applicant proposes to do with the property fit with the neighborhood, unduly burden the neighbors in terms of their views, et cetera? Those are the two different issues that the testimony has brought up. Only one of them is before us. The one that's actually before us is, does this property belong in the historic district? We know that it's non-contributing, that it was not built during the period of significance, and that it's geographically distinct from the rest of the historic district. It's kind of a peninsula. So on those criteria, it doesn't appear that this property belongs in the historic district. The separate set of questions, does what the applicant proposes to do with this property comply with the character or the feel of this neighborhood, neighbors, is a planning and design question. It's a zoning question, and it's not really a historic preservation question. The way that I'm thinking about this is, what historic character are we trying to preserve? Well, it's the historic character of the neighborhood as measured by whether the property is contributing, whether it was built during the period of significance, whether it's geographically contiguous, those things. It's not, unfortunately, it's not the neighbor's views. That's not a criteria for historic preservation. It's not the density or the use. That's not really a criteria. It's more massing and other things like that, period significance. And so on the question that's before us, does this property belong in the historic district? I think the answer is no. It does not belong in the historic district. So as I understand the motion, I will not be supporting it.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I do have some comments, but I did see at the bottom of my screen that the applicant popped up and asked if they had the ability to respond. And I don't know if they do or if.
Councilmember Halliburton, my understanding is that that's only in an appeal hearing. We're double checking that.
Okay. I can comment while we're figuring that out.
Yes.
Great. So I think, like Councilmember Bajent, I definitely see two separate issues on the table here. One being, does it belong in the overlay district? Historic Commission told us no, it doesn't. It is non-contributing. I have pause in that if it is non-contributing and they already have plans approved, what is the reason that they're wanting out? And I don't feel like reading through the testimony that I've already heard in the packet and then tonight that I've still quite gotten that answer. And so that does give me some pause. But if I were to examine it based off of the criteria that Councilmember Bajent just brought up, and off the criteria that the Historic Commission already looked at, and the statement that it should never have been in the historic district, then I would have to agree that I don't know why that it is. And I don't know if staff has any information on why it was originally included, and if it is strictly the 8th Street, or if there are other criteria that might have it included it to begin with.
So
other than it being directly on 8th Street.
So Councilmember Halliburton, we are not supposed to ask more questions
Sure.
of staff once we've closed the hearing.
All
I
right.
am pause until we get this question answered about whether or not Robin is allowed to comment, because we shouldn't go any further if she is.
Sure.
So if you'll give us just a moment, we're checking with legal counsel. You'd think I'd know these things. I've been here long enough, but I'm not sure if I'm right on this one or not. Okay. So the clarification is not very clear. Code does not require a rebuttal on a non-appeal. However, the applicant was allowed rebuttal at the lower level. And just to ensure that we are not abrogating anyone's due process rights, I think our best course of action would be to withdraw the motion, allow the applicant to have 3 minutes of rebuttal, and then we'll go back to motions.
Madam Mayor, to that end, I withdraw my motion.
All right. Seconder agrees?
Second, yeah.
Thank you. All right, we will reopen the public hearing and allow Ms. Gates to have 3 minutes to rebut. And this time, would you please give us your name and address when you start? Thank you.
So, can you hear me? Robin Gates, 2115 Heights Drive. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I will try to be concise. Few items. This one's kind of trivial, but it made me sound like an awful person saying we cut down all our trees. We had two. They were breaking down part of our rock wall, and that was the only way to save the rock wall. So I like trees. I don't typically go around doing that. As far as the height of my building, it is 3 floors, but I'm on a hill. So I've got 1 floor built into the basement, and I have 1 floor built into bonus trusses. So as you walk around my design, it is between 1.5 stories tall and 2 stories tall. 3 of the 4 people who complained about this are directly above me, and they have complained at every single hearing, and they've appealed everything. Their concern is purely their view, and there will be a little bit of my roof that they're going to see, but they have an unobstructed view right now, and they want to keep it that way. They've told me that. They've offered to pay me money to keep the view. It's all about the view. So, and I wasn't going to go there initially because I thought this was only about historical, but they've appealed everything, which is fine. That's their right. But when the city planning and zoning, historical, everyone's seen the design along the way, what I'm actually proposing, they've approved it. As far as the triplex goes, I have a single family home with an ADU, which by the way, is what Eric has. I have a home office, so I had a door to go to the 3rd floor so that if I have a client come by, there's no kitchen up there. I was going to make coffee while I worked. It's on the plans. A lot of what they're saying is just fake news. And I found out yesterday they sent an email out to the entire neighborhood and excluded me from it, saying, show up to the hearing tonight. She's doing a 3-story house, a multi-family is what it's called. I mean, I feel petty going there, and I wasn't even going to mention any of this, but they've been bullying and just rallying people with fake information. Again, all the actual information that I have presented to all the agencies has been approved every single time. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, any questions of Josh? Councilmember Halliburton, do you want to ask your question now that we're...
Yeah, that would be great. I get Josh, just to kind of reiterate, this one, it was originally put in the historic overlay district, is the only reason that it could be put into the historic overlay district because it bordered 8th Street, or are there potential other criteria that it met that helped it fall into the historic district originally?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton. So we don't have any direct information about why it was included. You know, there was some speculation in the report that may have been erroneously included. I think the fact that it is generally relatable to 8th Street, even though it doesn't have direct frontage, is probably the reason for inclusion. You know, it probably made a nicer boundary than jogging around this property. But again, we don't have any direct information about that.
Are there criteria? Are there other criteria that would allow it to fall into the historic district based on its location to everything else? Besides just the actual 8th Street location?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, not that I'm aware of, but when a consultant takes a look at creating the new historic district and doing historic surveys, they look at the area that is going to make the district the most sound, the most whole, with contributing properties and a district that's largely intact. So, you know, if this was a very outside of you know, the period that contributed to that district, they probably wouldn't have included it, but it was close, so they included it as non-contributing. But beyond that, you know, I don't know specifically of any special qualities of this structure that would qualify it for inclusion.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Josh.
Yep.
Madam Mayor.
One more question.
Thank you. I have a question for Josh also. So Josh, the applicant had stated that she needed to add a garage to her previously approved application. What would that process look like on a property that is included in a historic district?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Wooding, so a single-story garage without an ADU can be reviewed at staff level in the historic district. If it's 2 stories or it has an ADU, it would go to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, now I will close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of council?
Madam Mayor, I appreciate the applicant giving some clarification, but I'm going to stick with my original motion, which is that we deny DRH 20-434, a request to remove a property at 2115 Heights Drive from the historic district boundary in an R1CH.
You have a second. Motion dies for lack of a second.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would move that we approve DRH 20-434.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Bajent.
my comments would be the same as the ones I made earlier, that I perceive there being 2 different issues. One is the future use of the property, and the second is, does the current property that's there belong in the historical overlay district? For the reasons that are in our packet and the reasons that we've heard tonight, I don't think it does. It's non-contributing. It wasn't built during the period. It's not, you know, it's on that kind of Horn Peninsula. It's not really contiguous with the district at all. And so it makes sense to me to remove the historical overlay. And I would just reiterate that I do think that's separate and very distinct from what is eventually built there. We have a separate set of processes and a separate set of approvals for that. But the function and purpose of the historical overlay district is to protect interests and to protect things of value that are different than the issues that were raised with the proposed construction. And so on the narrow specific question of does this property belong in the historical overlay district, I think the answer is no.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a seconder, I will note that I agree with everything that Councilmember Bajan just noted. What I will add in addition is that I do share the same concerns as the citizens in this area and what they brought up. And but I also believe in and will note that that will come through in a second process if in fact it requires one. Many of the same afforded rights to this property owner will remain, even if it's removed from the historic district. But if efforts are made to go beyond what is required by zoning code, then that will require special special meetings and will involve us at that time. And I'll certainly be listening to those concerns at that time. The reason tonight I don't think that they're necessarily valid is because they, again, as Councilmember Bajan pointed out, don't specifically apply to the historical context of this property, which I believe has been shown it does not belong in the historic district.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councilmember Halliburton.
Yeah, my comments are for the most part the same. I think that these are two separate issues. And if you're looking at it strictly from a historic overlay position, I don't see it as, well, it's not contributing. It's already been classified as that, but I don't see it belonging in there. So I think it does make sense to remove it. I do continue to have pause just in that if it is non-contributing already, I'm not exactly sure what it is that, what the exact purpose and the reason for removing it is. What's not able to be done now that will be after, this potentially is removed. And so I do look forward to that process. And I know that some of those things can happen without city council approval, but I do know that there's an appeal process as well. And so that there is a chance that, regardless, that us or another commission will end up seeing this.
Madam Mayor.
Council President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to be supporting this motion. And I think that the issue for me is that, this house, the structure that's on this lot is definitely not contributing. It's not within the period of significance. But I don't believe that the consultants who helped us develop our historic overlay were arbitrary in their decision to include this lot in the historic overlay district. I believe that this lot very much contributes to the historic fabric, and that anything that's built on there should go through the Historic Preservation Commission process as a contributing location, not a contributing structure. So that's why I won't be supporting the motion tonight.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Sanchez.
I would just like to thank all my colleagues for asking great questions tonight. This is hard. The reason I didn't renew my second to Council Pro Tem Wooding's motion was based on the questions that my fellow colleagues asked. And one thing I noted, and I hope there's a way we can do this, I agree with Council Pro Tem Woodings. I think probably the reason that property was included was because it is so significant. And I think probably it was to protect the views. I think that might have been part of it. But as Councilmember Bajan pointed out, in order to be included in that preservation district, it's got to be about what's on it. And so this is an area that I think we should look into a little bit more deeply moving forward. But I also think it would be great whatever decision was made to include this property in the district, it wasn't made clear what the reason was. And I feel for anybody who loses their view, but unfortunately that's not a protection that we offer in the city of Boise. And I was one of those people who lost their view when I was a homeowner. I lost it to the stucco skybox put up by Boise State, and I lost it to the Norco nursing building that was put up by Boise State. So I completely understand, and my heart goes out to neighbors who feel that they're going to be missing out on that. And so I hope that the property owner continues to be mindful of relationships. And for myself, I love living in the North End, but beyond loving the views and the amenities, it's the people. And so I hope that after tonight that the people will remember that relationships are important moving forward. So I will be supporting the motion tonight.
Thank you. I am voting because I'm not officially the mayor. I'm here acting as the mayor tonight. And so I'll comment briefly. You know, this development was not developed at the time of significance of the North End historic area. It was developed later. It was one of the very first of the foothills developments, but it was a later addition. The particular layout of this lot means that part of it presents onto the historic district. But for me, the fact that the Historic Preservation Commission was unanimous in their assessment that it did not belong in the historic overlay zone tells me that the judgment should be based on whether or not this particular property, this particular building belongs in the historic overlay zone, and not the impact that it could have or might have on the other parts of the historic district when that was not made clear at the time of the survey that included it in the zone itself. In terms of what might happen on this lot, the rules are just about the same, whether it's a non-contributing structure in a historic overlay or whether it's in an R1C zone. None of us like to see development that changes the use of our own property, or at least what we perceive as the enjoyment of our own property. But if those changes follow the rules, providing more hurdles between the applicant and those changes isn't really in the best interest of a regulatory body, I don't think. So for those reasons, I will be voting for the motion, though I certainly understand the impact this particular property may indeed have on the significant historic properties near it. Anything further? With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Woodings.
No.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
5 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get done here. Number 4 in public hearings is DRH 20-398, Ken Litzinger, 1521 North 5th Street, an appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of the request for a certificate of appropriateness to construct a partial 2-story single-family structure in an R1CH zone. Cody, I think you're here to present.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you, I guess, hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. As you noted, this item is an appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of a certificate of appropriateness. That application was a request to build a new single-family home located at 1521 North 5th Street. Unfortunately, as you can see in the record, there's actually quite a bit more to this than that. In 2017, the owner did receive approval of a remodel of the home that you can see here on the property. That project did include a rear addition, dormers on the street side, roof elevation, and a new basement. In March of this year, the city received a complaint that the house had been demolished. Site visit from staff confirmed that was the case, and we immediately issued a stop work order. According to the applicant, they did discover in the construction process significant deterioration in structural components and did proceed to demolish the home. Unfortunately, that was done without the necessary permits. But the question of demolition, I think it's important, isn't what's before you this evening, and really wasn't before the commission when they heard this item. As you can see in the record, the applicant has since requested approval to construct a new 2-story home. The Historic Preservation Commission conducted 3 hearings, I believe, on this item in June, July, and again in September of this year. That denial has been appealed, which brings us to you this evening. I think if you saw in the record, the applicant did include 6 grounds in their appeal. Rather than walk through each of those individually, I think I can briefly summarize things and then I think it's important we hear from them. They do believe that their proposal to construct that home is consistent with the historic guidelines and should have been approved. They suggest that the denial was not based on relevant facts and evidence in the record. And they do believe that the decision was arbitrary and perhaps an abuse of the commission's discretion. As you can see in the record, the commission was understandably upset about the unpermitted demolition in this case. Their motion and deliberation did focus somewhat on perhaps punishing the applicant, and there was only minimal evaluation of the actual proposal for this new home. We're not suggesting for a second what occurred was acceptable. It's not. Contrary to what I think you might hear this evening, demolition like this isn't a widespread problem. We have had a few isolated incidents in recent years. Regardless of how isolated, though, it doesn't make it okay. Even one case does have an impact, and something like this just can't be undone. However, how aggressive we want to be in punishing an owner or a contractor is really a separate conversation. The commission in this case was charged with evaluating a proposal for a new home. As the record reflects, from our perspective, they really didn't do that, and there probably was an error in this case. Unpermitted demolition of a contributing structure like this beyond frustrating for all of us. Again, it's simply not the role of the Historic Preservation Commission to impose punishment on a property owner. Using the public hearing process to do so probably did exceed their statutory authority, and the absence of facts and evidence in the record justifying denial for construction of that home could be perceived as arbitrary. Based on that, we are recommending that council approve the appeal and overturn the decision this evening. We're suggesting you adopt the findings originally proposed by staff and allow that home to be built. And from our perspective, an appropriately designed home in this location, rather than a vacant construction site, is in the best interest of the neighborhood and where we're at this time. Finally, I would just like to say that my comments aren't intended in any way to reflect poorly on the commission, and certainly not to downplay the concerns of our friends in the preservation community. As a staff, we genuinely appreciate the work they all do. They have a right to be upset. And frankly, from a staff perspective, we're upset too. This isn't fun for any of us. I would note that we're implementing a series of measures focused on education and outreach in the hopes of avoiding this sort of thing in the future. We'd be happy to share those with council, but again, outside of an evaluation of a specific application like this. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Cody. I reviewed all of the materials, but I just wanted to make sure that I'm thinking about this correctly. So the homeowners applied to renovate the existing home, got in there, figured out that it wasn't structurally sound and that couldn't be done, and are basically building the original plan that they were going to use for renovation. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, that was what they originally took back to the Historic Preservation Commission. After the stop work order occurred, they came back and were proposing essentially to construct that same home. The Historic Preservation Commission did push back, and rightfully so, that given the situation, they should be looking at a home that they shouldn't be looking at trying to exactly mimic that historic structure, and you should be able to tell the difference. So that's what came back at that final Historic Preservation Commission hearing and was ultimately denied.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Your mic's not on. Elaine, your mic's not on.
I turned my mic off, sorry. Cody, I'd like to follow up on that before I ask for other questions. We had a, I guess, not dissimilar situation in the East End with a commercial building, the Roosevelt Market. And that building was allowed to be reconstructed as it was historically. What was the difference?
Madam Mayor, that the Roosevelt Market actually did follow the approved plans, and Ted's on here if I do misspeak, but it was approved, followed the approved plans, and that was a non-contributing. It was a non-contributing structure, which are looked at quite differently than a contributing structure.
But it was also demolished without approval, if I remember correctly. And then the restructure was done. Is that, but it was non-contributing?
Madam Mayor, it was non-contributing, and if I recall, they did maintain a number of the studs on that wall, and so the walls weren't completely removed, although quite significantly.
They were supposed to maintain a number of them, but they were completely gone for similar reasons. So, but if it was non-contributing, I think that's the explanation. Other questions of Cody?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Council President Pro Tem.
So Cody, there have actually been a couple of examples of this happening. One that I'm thinking of is on 7th and Residue. And that was several years back, where there was a home that was approved to be taken down to studs. There was a windstorm that ended up blowing over one of the remaining stud walls. And then the house was basically reconstructed to its original plan with an addition. And I guess my question is, and I mean, the results are beautiful. You can't tell the difference between a home that's been substantially remodeled and this new construction house. So I guess my question is, what's the thinking behind not wanting to substantially reconstruct historic homes to modern codes in a historic preservation overlay? I guess I'm just not totally tracking with that thinking.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, I think, and some of the folks you'll hear from this evening can probably speak better to that than myself. I think where the rub here is that, you know, we were to maintain significant portions of this structure, and rather than just completely, I mean, look at the photos, completely demolish it. Any sense of that historic structure is then gone. So building it back, you know, effectively to match exactly what was there, creates kind of a false sense of history. It's disingenuous, I guess.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I guess I'm going to take this a step further, Cody. If you're taking a structure down to the studs, you don't see the studs in a constructed home. And so that's where this disconnect is happening for me. You don't actually see anything of the home that was constructed in 1908 or whenever, once it's renovated. So I don't know, maybe I'm just not thinking right. I don't get it. And I grew up, and for the record, I grew up in a house that was built in 1898. So I appreciate old homes, but I also see their downfalls.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, that's a very, very fair question. And I guess to be completely honest, I've had this debate with Ted, Josh, and before Ted with Sarah on that very question. I think our preference, or maybe the approach, is that we should really consider something like this then, effectively a demolition from the beginning, or be very clear in just how we're communicating that up front, and not create false expectations for the neighborhood and preservation community. I think we could certainly do better in that regard.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Halliburton.
Yeah, Cody, I don't want to get stuck in the weeds with the discussion, because I know that's kind of that's our goal, to not get stuck in it. At this point, they're not wanting to put forward the old plans. These are the new plans. And so the builder and the owner don't have a desire to rebuild back up, even if that were an option for them. Is that correct? These are the plans that they're wanting to push going forward?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that is correct.
Okay, great.
Other questions? All right, now we will go to the appellant, who is also the applicant, Ken Litzinger, and Steve Vaught, who is the owner. I'm going to ask you both if it's possible to keep this to 15 minutes instead of 20, and we'll go from there.
Can you hear me just fine?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and Ken Litzinger will not be here. It will just be me.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Thank you for the time and consideration to review my appeal application tonight. My name is Steve Arvat. My address is 1924 North Montclair Drive, Boise, Idaho, 83702. I'm the applicant and the owner of the property at 1521 North 5th Street. I come before you to ask that this appeal be reviewed by simply the application presented before you and the facts at hand to approve the certificate of appropriateness. The application was recommended for approval by City Staff Planner Ted Vanagas. This project meets all criteria for approval in scale, sizing, mass, style, etc. For the Historical District, Commissioner Kuski to make a motion for denial to remove a stop work order due to an illegal demolition, asking help from the City Council is simply capricious and an unauthorized decision action performed by the Historical District when the matter was handled in 2 prior meetings with them. Those concerns and issues simply have nothing to do with this application. Any testimony given in the past or tonight speaking in relation to a demolition is simply noise and a waste of everyone's time. The application before you is for construction of a new home on a non-contributing lot in the Historical District. It must be reviewed on its own merits with the plans presented before you. The previous action of a demolition had been heard and closed in prior meetings with the Historical Commission back in June of 2020. At that time, the commissioners elected to defer their final decision until the July 2020 meeting because they specifically wanted to consult the city's attorney and judicial arm to see how to handle the situation. At the July 2020 meeting, the commission denied my application after it was reviewed by the city attorney for the reason that the plans at hand were for a replica, which was prohibited by law. No other discussion was given from the commission, nor any reason stating any future approval was contingent on future fines or penalties imposed against me. Furthermore, Commissioner Montoto stated in the June 2020 meeting that they wanted to be able to give me clear guidance to move forward with this project. The commission's specific guidance and direction was for me to redraw the plans to comply for another approval. At the Historical District's request, I redrew the plans so that they complied for a new submittal before the Historical District at the September 2020 meeting. I complied with all facets of approval for a certificate of appropriateness. For them to ask me only 2 questions at the September 2020 meeting of 1, if the city has imposed fines on me, and 2, if my builder has went through a certification process to build in the Historical District when none exist. These questions had absolutely nothing to do with the application at hand and is completely out of their authority and jurisdiction. The denial of my approval was wrong at that meeting because they continued to focus on a prior demolition. 2 commissioners supported the application's approval after Mr. Vanegas informed him that they had to give a specific reason for denial, not just simply a motion that they wanted me to appear before City Council and the mayor, based on something that is not relevant to the decision at hand. What guidance and help does the historical district need after the city's judicial arm has reviewed those matters and given them their input at prior meetings? Historical District Commissioner Kuski is simply angry that as an appointed commissioner by the mayor, he has no right to enforce a fine or penalty on the applicants before him. His reason for not giving me approval since no fine was assessed is simply egregious. The 2 new commissioners, Brown and Pape, who voted with him were not appointed and in attendance at the previous meetings and should not have considered those previous actions in their decision process for denial due to their lack of knowledge on the subject matter and only remaining focused on the prior demolition. 3 other commissioners with knowledge on the subject matter were absent at the time. This is why the decision must be overturned tonight. This project has been delayed for 9 months due to the historical district's dilatory decisions and dubious direction. This is more costly than any fine that could have been imposed on me the day of the stop work order, which at that time I was ready, willing, and able to pay months ago if that is what the commission needed done to get the project moving again. The holding cost, increased building prices over the last 9 months has resulted in tens of thousands of dollars in added costs to this project. How do these actions support the city's vision for diversity and affordability in the Boise when it has narrowly interpreted the rules and guidelines set forth before them to provide affordable housing in the area, leading to a narrow demographic of the population who are able to afford these homes? I think Derek Hurd, an architect, who ironically shares office space with Commissioner Richter, testified in the previous 2 meetings at several projects, illustrating the ignorance set forth that has been instilled in our previous 2 meetings at several projects with our present commissioner's mindset with his statements regarding that people who buy in this area know what they are getting into, and if they cannot afford it and or adhere to these guidelines, they should move to Meridian. These ignorant statements only solidify the narrow demographics that the historical district presently caters to help further drive the cost, size, scale of these projects within the district to escalate with no end in sight. No immediate neighbors have ever testified in dissent to the approval of the application at any prior meetings. I have spoken with many of my immediate neighbors, and they are anxious for the project to get off dead center and be completed, as they are tired of seeing the project in its current state. In fact, at the first meeting in June 2020, the only immediate neighbor that testified was Mr. Aldana, who supported the project's approval and as a builder validated the home's present state of disrepair. Since the stop work order, we have continued to comply and follow the city's direction on how to move forward for 9 months, which leads me here today. The fact will always remain that this is a building lot within the city, and eventually a home will be built here. We have started on a path to build a beautiful home that fits within the district, whereas the garage is almost complete. In addition to the basement, its rough end plumbing and the window wells are installed. I ask that you reverse the historical district's decision so that I can finish this home. Mayor and commissioners, I am certain you will hear testimony from many patrons and organizations such as NINA as to an act of an illegal demolition being performed. Like I said before, all this testimony should be ignored and disregarded tonight, as it will have nothing to do with the application before you. Now I'll answer any questions and or hear from public comments that you may need to address.
Questions for the applicant?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Bajent.
Mr. Vaught, you testified to the Historical Preservation Commission that essentially that this was the demolition part, which, I understand your view that it's not what's in front of us, is something that your builder had done, and that in one sense you were a victim of the builder as much as anything else. And so my question for you is, are you still using the same builder? Will you be using this builder going forward?
I still have a contract with that builder, and he has built numerous projects for me in the past, not to, condone his actions. He is a good person with good intentions, It's just, I trusted a professional opinion and I'm in an unfortunate situation.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the Neighborhood Association. Sherry, I believe you're here.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor and council members. As stated earlier, my name is Sherry Battazzo, and I'm here as the designated representative for the North End Neighborhood Association. My address is 311 North 23rd Street, Boise, 83702. And I believe if we have 20 minutes, we'll keep it to 15. I'm sharing my time this evening with incoming President Chris Wagner. A few points of clarification to provide some context of the Neighborhood Association's position. At the original Historic Preservation Commission hearing, the testimony by the applicant was that they thought they were allowed to take apart the structure and put it back together as long as they reused the materials. This resulted in the roof and walls being removed and the structure effectively demolished as stated by the city when they issued the stop work order. The applicant then came before Historic Preservation Commission presenting a replication of the demolished home. The commission then denied that plan with merited findings, and how we say it is, replication is not preservation. At that time, this demolition would have come before you, but instead of appealing that decision such that it would land here, this applicant brought new plans before the commission, which put distance between the original action of the illegal demolition. I want to say that the North End Neighborhood Association does not oppose the appeal being made by the applicant due to the lack of findings specific to the proposal in the application that came before the commission on September 29th. Nor are we here to keep the appellant from building his house. That said, reviewing this appeal on its own merits and recommending approval steps over the actions taken that led up to the new application, and it sets a dangerous and clear precedent for future demolition of historic buildings, as well as minimizes the protections set forth for the sake of preservation. Staff's report states that any discussion on demolition should occur outside of a public hearing on a specific application. But demolition and illegal demolition of a contributing structure are two different things. These types of permit violations are misdemeanors, and the code allows for penalties and fines. At a minimum, they should be enforced. Lack of enforcement not only leaves zero incentive to follow the laws, but also results in a de facto punishment to those who choose to honor the protections afforded to historic structures and what it takes to preserve them. We acknowledge that the appellant vehemently denies he purposely demolished the structure, yet the facts remain. A contributing structure which was permitted to be preserved was illegally demolished, and the city did not enforce a penalty. Over the past decade, it has become a more regular occurrence for applicants to demolish and demolish through neglect, demolish on accident, and then ask for forgiveness based on lack of awareness of requirements, cost prohibitions, and claims of structural deterioration and disintegrity. Lack of enforcement by the city undermines the guidelines set forth by this council and reduces the ability of the historic preservation to uphold those guidelines, further enabling this behavior. If the city has adopted a policy for historic preservation, asked volunteers to staff a commission to uphold historic preservation, had citizens vote their desire to adopt specific historic districts, and hire a staff for the purpose of administering these historic districts, what possible justification could be offered for the lack of enforcement that this has become the norm? We fear that at the rate the city is allowing for demolition, either intentionally or unintentionally, of the contributing structures, it will not be long before there are no longer sufficient contributing inventory to justify maintaining the facade of having historic districts. Again, without enforcement, it breaks down the integrity of the system. We look to you tonight to uphold that integrity. And in the wake of the hearing you heard before this one, the one on Heights Drive, you've all demonstrated a real regard for historic districts and the properties located therein. And we feel strongly that the future of these districts will be deeply impacted by your decision made here tonight. With that, I yield my remaining time to Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Sherry.
Hi, I'm Chris Wagner. I'm the current president of the North End Neighborhood Association. And we do have concerns, Madam Mayor and members of council, and we thank you for allowing us to speak. The growth in Boise has created an overwhelming increased need for housing. And if we allow illegal demolition of historic homes to go unpunished, we risk more demolition as a way of skirting requirements and proceeding with new construction. As we've heard this evening, there are added layers to approval within the historic districts. And if homeowners are just allowed to demolish their homes and proceed with new construction, we skirt the need for the historic districts. And so it leaves the question of, why do we have historic districts if we do not punish those who illegally demolish homes? If you approve this, it sends a message that one could demolish a structure and then build a new home without any sort of ramification or punishment. It is the position of NINA that we need to preserve the historic homes within our district, within our neighborhood, and we ask that council deny this until the issue of, or I guess we don't oppose the project. We ask that the city council address the appropriate punishment for this illegal demolition.
Questions of the neighborhood association? Seeing none, we'll go to the list. We have no one in the audience signed up. This is an appeal hearing. You must have been a party of record at the original hearing in order to testify. We do have 6 or 7 people signed up online. We'll go to those, starting with Mark Baltus.
Madam Mayor, the only person that is on the parties of record list that is online is Paula Benson.
Okay, well, I've been told the only person online who is of record is Paula Benson. So Paula, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Paula.
I'll get started. There are 2 main issues surrounding this appeal tonight. One is specific to this appeal, and the second is part of an even larger, more important discussion that the city needs to have about how our local districts are managed. In this case, a contributing home in a protected local historic district was demolished without a permit application being submitted to the city. It is the responsibility of the owner and the contractor to understand that a permit is required to remodel the exterior of a home. It is the responsibility of the city to enforce the laws that it has passed and to enforce consistent consequences when those laws are broken. The owner has appealed based on his contention that the denial of his application for a new build was related to the illegal demolition of the contributing structure rather than his plans for a new build, which received approval recommendation from city staff. If the Historic Preservation Commission is not allowed to administer punishment or penalty, then we all need to rely on the city to serve that function. I believe HPC denied it because they asked for help from the city on that point of how to enforce the law. I hope you can all see the clear precedent that this sets for an open path to demolition of historic buildings. Lack of understanding about the existing laws for work done at a contributing building in a protected local historic district should not result in approval for a new build with no penalty attached. The city's legal department needs clear direction from mayor and council as to whether protection of established local historic districts is a priority or not. We've been told they're hesitant to prosecute these cases, and we'd like to understand if that's true and why. It's not punishment in our eyes, it's law enforcement. Owners in local historic districts need and deserve clear understanding of how the process works, and they need a clear understanding of the consequences when the law is broken. The East End Neighborhood Association, the North End Neighborhood Association, and Preservation Idaho are all looking to you to establish whether the laws in place must be followed and then give direction to city legal staff when those laws are broken. What we have now, we feel, are signals that apologies or appeals for forgiveness will result in a, well, we can't undo it, so let's move on kind of scenario. And that owners and contractors are being inadvertently encouraged to take advantage of this. The city needs to send a clear message that it will enforce the laws it has enacted. Whether you approve this new build tonight or not, discussion and clear guidance for city staff on protection of our local historic districts is in order, and we'd appreciate being part of it. Thank you.
I turned my mic off again. I have a quick question for you, Paula. Thank you. I understand the concern everyone has about the perceived lack of enforcement of the demolition. Staff tonight testified that potentially, and questions from Council President Pro Tem Whittings, I think, illuminated that potentially we're allowing what are essentially demolitions when we allow a building to be taken down to the studs and then rebuilt. And if you get it to that state, which happened with the Roosevelt Market, which happened here, and you find out that those structural elements are not sound, what would you suggest we do? Do you agree with staff that perhaps we should call that a demolition to begin with? Or do you have another solution?
I think that my understanding of how the process is supposed to work, the applicant takes out a permit with specific requests for specific actions. If they get into construction or deconstruction and they find something different than they expected, and they feel that there is deterioration that prohibits further application of what they have on application file, forgive me for that stumbling of words there, but if they find that they feel that they need to go further, their job and their requirement is that they go back to the city, they stop, then they contact the city and say, we found things we didn't expect, we think we need to do more, or we need to bring in somebody to help us. What we feel is happening is that they take things apart, they find things that weren't expected, but we feel really, Councilman Clegg, should be expected. When you take apart a house from 1908 or 1920 or 1870, if you think you're going to find a foundation and walls and ceilings tied together like you would in 2010 or 2020, then you really aren't prepared to do that job. So if I'm answering your question correctly, what needs to happen is they apply for a specific permit. If they find they need to exceed that permit, they stop work and they go back to the city before they do another moment work. And they get professional input and the city staff input and the neighborhood input and expert input that helps them guide next steps. If it results in demolition, that's one option. But our feeling is that very strongly, 99% of the time, there is a way to manage these things, and allowing people to do demolition and to exceed permits without any kind of a consequence really just encourages them to do the work and then ask for forgiveness. And I don't disagree with Cody. We work very well with he and with Ted, but we are finding more and more permit violations that result in actions being taken and then forgiveness ask that, well, we didn't mean to do that. We didn't know that would happen. It fell apart and we didn't mean it to. Now we can't fix it, so let's just move forward. That's really what we're trying to avoid. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I just wanted, going forward, we clearly, I think, probably need to address this somehow. I'm also going to ask our legal staff to address the issue of enforcement versus the application decision-making process that commissions and councils are involved in. If we could turn to our legal staff. Rob.
Certainly, Madam Mayor, members of Boise City Council, with respect to applications before land use decision-making bodies such as historic preservation, design review, planning or zoning, or even the Boise City Council, it's very important in order to not jeopardize both the land use decision as well as a possible subsequent prosecution to blend enforcement and the land use decision together. So in this instance, if staff did refer this for some sort of enforcement action, that would need to be independently reviewed outside of the land use decision-making process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Paula, we did not get your address for the record. Could you come back and give us that?
Yes, of course, 1564 Lens Lane.
Thank you. All right, with that, are there any other questions of Paula or of the legal, of Rob, about the legal opinion he just stated?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Halliburton.
Yeah, question for both. And maybe I can start with Paula since she's standing up there. Paula, good to hear your voice. If you could just maybe quickly reiterate what you would like to see council do tonight. I want to make sure that I am clear on what your request is.
Thank you, Councilmember Halliburton. So there's two issues tonight. I have empathy for what's going on this lot. The house is gone. He's waited a long time. There have been increased costs, which I have empathy for, but are also a result of how this was managed and mismanaged. I think a home needs to be approved. I think that the historicism might be somewhat overplayed is the word I might use. It shouldn't be an exact replica of the house that was there, but it should absolutely be of massing and style that is consistent with what was there and what is consistent with the neighborhood. So I don't think it's inappropriate that you approve whether this plan or something else. Overriding issue that we have, and in working with the neighborhood associations, the overriding issue we all have is how this process is managed. People seem to be unclear, or they say that they're unclear on what is required of them when they want to remodel a house that involves taking it apart. We also feel that demolition is overused in terms of houses being unsafe because they're older. They were built consistent with the style of their time, and they've lasted for 100 years. So tonight, I guess I'd look at, if you want to approve this plan, I will leave that up to your judgment. But what really needs to happen, Councilman Halliburton, is that we need to sit down with the city, and we need to have a clear understanding of what the process is, and even more importantly, what the enforcement options are. If city legal staff has said that they're not comfortable prosecuting these cases, we want to understand why. If the law's on the books and it's not enforced, it's really just an enticement to ignore the law. So we'd like to be clear on that. And my understanding is that Historic Preservation Commission felt that they couldn't take that on, and they needed to turn to City Council for help with that bigger issue. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Paula. That was really helpful. And I think a lot of those things are certainly worth considering. Just one quick follow-up to you. What's being proposed with this building that's in front of us right now, you're not opposed to this exact building. If it wasn't for the history, if it wasn't for the background, you think that this fits what would need to happen and look like for a complete rebuild or a build up. Is that correct?
What I would say is if the North End Neighborhood Association is okay with it, then Preservation Idaho would agree with their assessment.
All right. Thanks so much, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And then Rob, just to make sure that I understood what you said earlier, and Cody, I think probably said it earlier as well. The decision that we're making tonight, we can't factor in any of the process that took place before this as far as the demolition goes. We're strictly looking at a building proposal, and we can't take that other stuff into account. Is that correct? Is that what I understood?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that's essentially correct. You're limited tonight on an appeal to evaluate the appeal based upon what is set forth in Boise City Code, and really shouldn't really deviate beyond that or into the area necessarily of enforcement.
All right. Thank you, Rob. And then I guess maybe just one final question to Cody. When he brought that up earlier, Cody, were you referring that we would continue this discussion later in a work session? Is that what you were implying, or outside of a work session?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that's correct. Just if there was a desire by mayor and council to have further discussion on, we have a whole series of thoughts on education and outreach, and then just general direction on how heavy-handed we want to be in imposing fines. We'd certainly, from a staff perspective, appreciate that discussion.
Okay, thanks, Cody. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Other questions? I guess just for process, I would note that it's not out of the question for a council member after we've made our decision to make a unanimous consent request that we request such a work session. And that way we get it on the record. Okay, we have one other person online who's raised their hand, but it's not a party of record. So whoever you are, I apologize, but you're not going to be able to testify tonight. You had to have testified at the original hearing in order to qualify for that. Is there any other party of record that has raised their hand?
Madam Mayor, the NINA representative, Sherry Batazzo, has raised her hand again.
Okay, yes, we will go to rebuttal. This is an appeal, so it does have rebuttal. And I'm trying to remember who gets the first rebuttal.
So because the applicant and appellant are both the same entity, they would get the last. So if
Okay.
you want to hear from Nina from their unused time, I can do that before.
Okay, all right. So Sherry, I would let you know that if you were the appellant, which is some more typical in these, then you would get a rebuttal. Since you are not, the applicant and the appellant are the same, they are the ones that do get the rebuttal. And I do know that you forgave a little more than 5 minutes. If you have something that you would like to add that can fit within that time, I'll let you add it, but this is not a rebuttal. It has to be new information. Is that clear? Okay. Clerk's working to get you back in. Okay, so if it's information you would have given us in your original testimony, but not rebuttal, I'll allow it.
Madam Mayor and council members, it is not a rebuttal. I just wanted to point out that Sheila Grisham from the East End Neighborhood Association actually is a party of record. She did testify at the original hearing, and she's the person that has her hand raised that just wanted to add some comments if she so be allowed. And with that, I'll mute myself.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes.
Clerk is checking. We did have Brittany Sigliano listed. I don't know if she was listed as a representative of East End.
Madam Mayor, I would defer to Cody Riddle to see if that individual was a part of his party of record list.
Cody, can you tell us if?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Ms.
No.
Sigliano testified in her personal capacity at the lower hearing.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Sigliano states at the beginning of her testimony at the lower hearing that she was testifying in her personal capacity and not as a representative.
Okay. Thank you for remembering that. I couldn't remember. So, we did not have both neighborhood associations. Is that correct, Cody?
Madam Mayor, that's correct.
All right. So I apologize. According to our records, Sheila, you are not a party of record. And I think with that, we will go back to the applicant appellant for no more than 5-minute rebuttal.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to restate and thank everybody for their time tonight. And I do hope that you will approve this application based on the merits of the application so that we can move forward with construction, because a long time has went on. I feel like I've been punished long enough with the long delays, the increased business cost, and things of that nature. So with that, I'll rest with that. But in regards to Nina and the Idaho Preservation District, I do want to let them know, as far as if I was sitting in their shoes and some of the frustrations and things I went through that I think city council needs to address in perhaps the workshop and things going forward, is obviously public safety will always prevail. So how does that affect the decisions of these demolitions, and at what stopping point and what should be done and things of that nature? And I do think there's a lot of issues with the bifurcated process between the city of Boise and their definitions with construction and the working drawings, building permits that get approved through the building process, and the historical district's rules, regulations, and guidelines. I think there needs to be a revisit to where that bifurcated process perhaps needs to work better together, and that these, if you look at demolition and things of that nature specifically, the historical district, I believe, if over 50% of the structure is gone, then there needs to be a demolition permit. So I would make the argument that homes that, like mine, that were approved have a de facto demolition permit in the city's working drawings, because of the fact that it's self-evident that the working drawings, over 50% of the home will be gone. And just to let the council members know, when we did take this home down to the studs, we cut sections of the walls off, laid them on the ground to reuse them because the subfloor was breached, broken, and we had to replace it. So there's many other ways to look at preservation, and you can't have a blanket policy in the historical district or perhaps the city that govern an individual project, because it's nebulous. So there needs to be ways to work when these issues do arise of these complications and things of that nature that lead to public safety where a demolition might occur. How can we preserve and reuse these other building materials to keep a contributing status like this property had? And we had building materials there, but because the demolition was deemed, we were ordered to clean up everything, haul everything off, and we weren't allowed the opportunity to reuse any of those materials that possibly could have been reused and kept a property's contributing status going forward. Because just like one of the council members said, when you're redoing these homes and the studs are in the wall, you can't see them anyways. So it's kind of like things that make you go, huh, is it really a historical structure when you can't see anything? The essence of it is there. But I'm just saying that we shouldn't make knee-jerk reactions. We should have some kind of policy in place to where going forward, people don't have to be in a situation like I am 10 months down the road of these delays, to where perhaps there's a protocol to follow that can get projects moving again, and preservation can be done in other ways to keep projects contributing status and homes historical going forward. And with that, I rest, and I hope you approve my project tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any further questions of staff? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of council?
Madam Mayor,
Council President Pro Tem.
I'm going to put a motion on the floor and then have some comments so long as I get a second. My motion is that we uphold the appeal, DRH 20-398 at 1521 North 5th Street, on the grounds that the commission's decision was arbitrary, since the merits of the application and the new construction were not addressed in the motion or the associated findings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
This is the second time now in my lifetime that I've seen a substantially similar situation. And the first time I saw it was as the president of the North End Neighborhood Association. And we asked these very same questions of the city at the time. What are the penalties for tearing down a historically contributing structure and without a demolition permit? And those questions were never answered. Now here we are years later, the questions still aren't answered. And I really think that we as a council need to make sure that we have answered those questions so that our Historic Preservation Commission knows the standing, knows what grounds they have to stand on, and that it's very clear to people who are seeking to remodel historic structures in the North End and the East End, and wherever we may have historic districts in the future, what the penalties are if they choose to go outside of the agreed upon process. So I think that, I mean, by all accounts, this application looks appropriate for the site. While it's unfortunate, borderline tragic that we lost a historic structure in the process, this particular application doesn't have anything to do with that. We're really looking at the appropriateness of this particular home, and I think that it will be a great contribution to that neighborhood.
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Bajan.
I'll be supporting the motion, although I want to flag that there were general conditions and site-specific conditions in the September report from our staff that we may wish to attach as well if we're going to be reversing and modifying the ruling to an approval. The reason that I'll be supporting the motion is that this is one of the relatively rare cases, I think, who compels us to reverse. We can find error on various grounds. One is a violation of our city law. It's clear that the decision of the Historical Preservation Commission was motivated by frustration, very palpable frustration in the record over the demolition of this home, which is not a criteria in the approval process. It's clear that the review body's decision exceeded its statutory authority in that what the review body wanted to do was seek to punish the applicant, and the way that they sought to achieve that objective was to send it to us, and the record refers to, having to explain themselves to the city council. That's not approval or denial of an application. That's adjudication and punishment. That's outside of its authority. The decision was made on an unlawful procedure. The basis of the decision was essentially, we don't want to decide, we want the council to decide, so we'll issue whatever ruling it takes to get it in front of the council. That's not the correct procedure. And I would note the irony that the frustration in the record here is over an applicant and a builder who did not follow the correct procedure for the demolition. So the irony is, of course, we haven't followed the correct procedures to get this to council either. Finally, I think the decision is arbitrary and capricious and an abuse of discretion in that, not only was it not made based on facts in the record about the application, but the transcript of the Historical Preservation Commission shows that the movement actively sought to exclude the facts in the record from the basis of the motion. The motion was made simply to get it in front of city council. So under our standard of review for appeals, I think we have to reverse. That's on this application. The separate issue of what to do about unpermitted demolitions and about the seek self-help and ask for forgiveness later problem is real. It's a serious problem. It may only happen occasionally or only happen a few times a year, but it is a flagrant disregard of the law. It's bulldozing a home in violation of city permitting processes and rules is it's against the rules in a particularly egregious way, and that it is in your face. It's in your face to the neighborhood. It's in your face to the city. It's in your face to our poor staff who had to go inspect the site and confirm that the project they had been working on had been bulldozed. It deserves punishment and not education. I would hope that someone does, and if no one does, I will ask for unanimous consent on a work session from this. My point of view is that contractors who are involved in this should lose their license or their ability to do business in Boise. That homeowners who are involved in this knowingly should have to pay a statutory fine that is meaningful. It's no joke, and it's impossible to tell from the record here who is at fault or who is to blame. I know that if the builder did this to me and subjected this applicant to the type of jungle punishment that he's received in our administrative processes, I would fire the builder. He hasn't done that, and that causes me to wonder if somebody took this bet. None of that is before us. Everybody in the record is angry about this, and for good reason. We owe it to the public. We owe it to our builders. We owe it to the volunteers on our Historical Preservation Committee and the volunteers who come to testify tonight to have a standard and to enforce it in a way that is as toothsome as the violation of the standard is flagrant. So I'll be supporting the motion, and I will be enthusiastically supporting real and meaningful work by this council to make it terrifying for somebody to try to do this in the future.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Member Halliburton.
I seconded the motion for all the reasons that have already been mentioned, and I won't dive into those too much. And I do anticipate that there will be a motion to address a lot of the other issues that have already been brought up, not only by the folks that are here tonight, but at really the request of the Preservation Commission as well. So I'm in favor of the motion.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson here. I also support the motion. I think it was well stated by my colleagues here ahead of me, and also support the unanimous consent to make it terrifying for this to happen again.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, you have all stated the reasons that we need to hold this appeal tonight, but also the reasons that we need to act. And so I won't add any more.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to also tag on to my original motion that the staff return to us with findings on the appeal.
All right, thank you. With that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, Councilmember Halliburton.
did we add any of the conditions that Councilmember Bajent requested to the motion?
We just asked staff to return findings that would include those. All right, with that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to request unanimous consent that we have a work session with our planning staff to discuss many of the issues that we talked about tonight, including demolitions that are unauthorized, and perhaps that we even involve Historic Preservation Commission in their expertise on the matter, in really coming up with some guidelines and some real policy that's enforceable around historic structures and illegal demolitions, so that we're not facing this situation again in 5 years or 10 years. And hopefully we can alleviate that.
All right, without objection, we will do it. Is there anything else to come before the council?
Madam Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned. Good night. Thank you, everyone.